This is the story of Carcerian Levandian, who after falling in battle against a god, finds himself reincarnated into the body of a weak boy. Now burdened with that boy's responsibilities, he have to start again from zero to obtain his original power as a sword god. Monsters infiltrated the world, plunging humanity into despair. People fought until their last breath to protect the place they called home. Among those brave souls was the protagonist of this story, Carcerian Levandian, who stood against the menace with unyielding resolve. For many years he battled countless monsters, piling up corpses with nothing but the blade he carried, and without a trace of fear in his heart. Then, one fateful day, he faced Aaron's sworn brother. The battle was brutal, but Levandian eventually struck him down. Yet, in the aftermath, he too fell in battle. But fate wasn't finished with him. As his soul drifted through an endless void, he encountered a human boy from a distant planet called Earth. The boy's name was Dolgen, and he was on the brink of death for reasons unknown. Before dying, he wished to make a final request of Levandian, but the warrior immediately refused, unwilling to hear it. After all, he just wanted to rest in peace. He had lost his country to monsters, lost his loved ones, and died a wretched death. Still, Dolgen wasn't asking for his own life. Though he no longer wished to live, he desperately wanted his family to have a peaceful one. Hearing this, Levandian finally paused and listened. The boy's eyes lit up with a spark of hope as he mustered the courage to ask. He wanted his family to live in peace, and so Levandian accepted. The warrior awakened on Earth, inhabiting the body of the teenage boy Dolgen. Now, his mission was clear: to protect Dolgen's family. His first step led him to infiltrate Namsen Gate, a C-rank dungeon. Entry was restricted to registered heroes, but the automated system kept demanding an ID card he obviously didn't have. Without hesitation, he forced his way inside, setting off alarms that blared about an unauthorized intruder. Once inside, he wandered through the dungeon, searching for monsters to slay. That's when he crossed paths with a licensed hero party. With their official gear and authorization, they quickly assumed Dolgen was just a lost kid. Since they were heading toward the exit anyway, they offered to guide him out. But Dolgen's silence was unsettling. His casual clothes, his simple bag, and his demeanor made him look nothing like a hero. Sure, porters sometimes dressed casually, but his appearance was far too plain. Perhaps he was a porter who'd been abandoned by his party, or maybe something else entirely. Finally, Dolgen broke his silence. He admitted he hadn't come with a hero's party. He had entered on his own. One of the heroes sighed, realizing what kind of case this was. He had seen it plenty of times, some naive fool inspired by flashy commercials about heroes, rushing headfirst into a gate. But that kind of recklessness only led to death. The man began lecturing, saying that becoming a hero required certification, training, and proper testing. Rookies should stick to F-rank gates, not recklessly barge into C-rank ones where death was nearly guaranteed. But Dolgen wasn't interested in advice. He coldly declared he didn't need their help. The hero party was stunned by the boy's sharp tone. They had only tried to help, yet he dismissed them without hesitation. A few of them grew irritated, but their leader raised a hand, telling them to let it go. If the kid didn't want help, then so be it. The leader felt confident the boy would eventually learn the hard way why you don't ignore wise counsel. He figured the kid would soon realize how unforgiving these gates were, far different from the TV shows that glorified heroes as if they were divine saviors. Soon enough, Dolgen came face to face with a giant troll staring him down, ready to devour him alive. The monster launched an attack, only to miss and smash the ground, but Dolgen moved so quickly that the troll couldn't even comprehend what had happened. He then balled his fist and delivered a devastating punch strong enough to blow the troll's face clean off. With the monster dead, it was time for loot. First, he grabbed the sword the troll had been carrying. Then, using that same weapon, he dug into its body and extracted a shiny gemstone. It was only a low-grade magic stone, so insignificant that Dolgen never even bothered with them in his previous life. But since he was flat broke now, he had no choice. Suddenly, more monsters swarmed the area, enraged at seeing their comrades slaughtered. Dolgen spun around and hurled the gemstone so fast it literally blew one of their heads clean off. The other two charged in recklessly, practically begging for death. Dolgen was more than happy to oblige. As he tore through them, the scene shifted back to the group of heroes trudging through the dungeon. Their minds were still stuck on the encounter with the young man. The orange-haired woman admitted she was worried about Dolgen's safety, fearing he might end up dead. But the leader reassured her that was highly unlikely. If he was some unauthorized intruder, agents from the control center would eventually find him. Those agents were always B-rank or above. And since this was only a C-rank gate, there was no way he would die here. As long as the kid didn't recklessly charge into battle, his life wasn't in danger. In fact, the leader assumed the arrogant brat was probably trembling in fear, waiting for the agents to save him. But reality was the complete opposite. Dojin was making monsters tremble. With a single punch, prey dropped instantly. His speed was so overwhelming that enemies couldn't even touch him, let alone crush him under their blades. Appearing behind one, he delivered a kick that demolished its head. With all of them down, he collected another sword and proceeded to harvest the magic stones for himself. After filling his bag, he was ready to leave. Still, he was disappointed with the haul, nothing but low-grade gems, weighing him down like useless junk. Just then, an agent spotted him and called out to his comrades. Before Dojin could fully turn, the suited men fixed him with a cold, sharp glare. They explained they were from the gate control center and demanded to see his hero registration card. If he was unregistered, he would have to come with them to the control center. Dojin didn't respond right away, which only made the agent tense up further. His tone grew even colder as he insisted Dojin cooperate and follow the proper procedures. The only response the suits received was annoyance carved into Dojin's face, the unnecessary drama killing his mood. Fed up, he simply turned to leave. Since words weren't working, the suits threatened to handcuff him if he refused to comply, warning that physical force could be used if necessary. One of the more impatient agents dared to grab his hand, threatening him with the injuries he'd sustain if he resisted, insisting that the responsibility would fall solely on his shoulders. The agent urged that it was in everyone's best interest to settle things with words, not violence. But Dojin had heard enough. He snatched the man's hand back and warned him to stop acting like a thorn in his path. The chilling threat made the agent instinctively flinch, a cold shiver racing down his spine. The other two pulled out their magic-infused batons, grade 4 staffs, powerful enough to subdue an orc, yet far too weak to injure someone like Dojin. With a sharp twist, he forced the agent's wrist back until the man whined in pain. Dojin then issued a final warning they should leave now if they didn't want to lose the last shred of dignity they still had. Eventually, the duty-bound suits were forced to retaliate with violence. They swung their staffs, trying their best to land a hit, but none succeeded. Dojin retaliated with brutal precision, driving a crushing blow into one man's back before slamming his fist into another's stomach. Finally, he focused on the bespectacled agent, the last one standing. The man tensed, sensing what was about to happen. In an instant, Dojin blurred out of sight, vanishing into thin air. Panic gripped the agent as his target disappeared, only for a sneaky punch to slam into his gut, sending him staggering backward in pain. Fed up with the agent's persistence, Dojin began considering registering as a hero after all. One of the agents assured him that as long as he avoided shady or illegal activities, the control center wouldn't come after him. Curious, Dojin asked about something called a rift, a question that left the agent visibly stunned. Here's the quick context. This world was dotted with countless passages connecting to another realm where strange monsters lived. From the corpses of those monsters came gemstones harvested as valuable energy sources. Because of their importance, the government oversaw these passages to maintain strict control. Government-controlled passages were called gates. Uncontrolled or unsealed passages were known as rifts. Back with Dojin, he found it frustrating that agents followed him everywhere, accusing him of trespassing no matter which gate he entered. The poor agent explained that whenever an unregistered hero entered a gate, the control center was immediately notified and dispatched nearby agents. As for rifts, entering one was far riskier. Unlike gates, trespassing into a rift carried strict punishment, no warnings, no plea bargains. Dojin didn't care to hear more. Grabbing the agent by the face, he flung him aside like trash. By now, the man deeply regretted not calling headquarters earlier. This situation was far beyond his pay grade. As Dojin glanced back one last time, he thought about how pitifully weak the man was. The agent, clutching a fractured arm, shouted empty threats, promising to capture him and throw him in prison. The scene shifted to Gassen Digital Complex. Once a corporate hub, it had become the Hero Complex, a massive building where all trade in magic stones and dungeon spoils took place. These days, it was busier than ever. Dojin entered one of the stores that specialized in buying and selling stones. Behind the counter was a Gen Z clerk scrolling endlessly through social media. When Dojin announced he wanted to sell magic stones, the cunning shop owner immediately began boasting about his business, claiming this branch offered the highest prices in the country. Dojin placed his haul on the counter, a pile of low-grade stones still smeared with monster blood. The owner's face twisted in disgust, but he masked it and proceeded with the transaction. He politely asked if Dojin wanted coffee while the stones were being processed. Soon Dojin sat sipping from a cup while the owner carefully scrubbed the blood off each gem. When the cleaning was done, the owner tallied the haul: 12 low-grade stones, 16 medium-grade ones, plus 5 higher-quality stones. After deducting a hefty 40% commission, Dojin would receive about 5.5 million won. Dojin wasn't happy. It didn't seem fair. He had done all the hunting, risked his life, and spent hours grinding. How could the shop owner think he deserved nearly half the profit? The man smugly insisted he was being generous, charging only 40% when competitors demanded at least 45%. Confident, he even dared Dojin to take his stones elsewhere, claiming no one would offer better. Dojin didn't buy it. He calmly began repacking his stones into his bag. Desperate, the owner grabbed his hand and demanded compensation instead. 30,000 won for appraisal, 10,000 for the coffee, and damages for the towel ruined by blood. Altogether, the man insisted Dojin owed him 350,000 won. Dojin wasn't budging. Seeing his demands ignored, the owner resorted to threats, summoning 3 C-class heroes he kept as guards. The heavy hitters barged in, ready to deal with any trouble. Dojin responded with a cold glare, locking eyes with the owner. Moments later, the scene cut to the shop owner's terrified, sweat-soaked face. His earlier arrogance had crumbled. Dojin had effortlessly dispatched the 3 guards, proving who the real powerhouse was. With the threat eliminated, Dojin calmly negotiated the commission down to 1%. No questions, no arguments. The owner could only nod in fear as the deal went through. Dojin walked out with a fat stack of cash earned through his fists.
Tell him to bring me my money.
When he returned home, his grandmother and younger sister were stunned by the enormous amount of money. Grandma even suspected the bills might be fake. Dojin quickly covered it up with a lie, claiming the money came from lending cash to a friend whose business suddenly thrived. Grandma wasn't convinced her grandson had such a friend, but when Dojin insisted it was a childhood companion, she let the matter drop. Meanwhile, his sister was overflowing with pride, thrilled by the sudden wealth. Dojin, playing the role of a caring Oni-chan, patted her head and gave her hope for the luxurious life ahead. She jumped around joyfully, celebrating their newfound fortune. Watching her, Dojin realized he was making real progress toward fulfilling the dying wish of Co. Dojin, the body's original owner, to give his grandmother and half-sister Yoon a safe and happy life. That boy had vanished before Dojin could ever speak to him, and when he awoke, he had become Co. Dojin. Now, his sole mission was to ensure the small family lived safely and comfortably. For that, he had his eyes set on the safest house in Korea, a home worth 110 billion won. For him, making money won't be an issue as long as he regains his original strength. This world shares many similarities with the one he came from, the one that was destroyed. The only major difference is that the rifts, gates, and monsters here are all slightly weaker than those in the world he once saw fall. To him, who once held the title of sword god in his previous life, this place is nothing more than a sandbox. So far, he's only been fighting at 1/10 of his original power. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door and the visitor says he wants to see Dojin. Bro stands up and decides to answer. As he opens the door, he finds 2 thugs standing outside. These guys are here to claim a debt Dojin supposedly owes an insane 48 million. Seeing this, Dojin's sure these are loan sharks. They're from the company Dojin borrowed money from before he left this world for good. Though the amount was supposed to be just 5 million won, originally for his grandma's hospital bills, these guys are charging absurd interest and demanding 10 times the original amount in no time. They know he's been making money through gates lately, so they want him to cough up the cash since it's all documented in the contract. But the only repayment these bastards get is a jaw-shattering punch straight into the big guy's face. That single blow sends the thug flying, leaving his partner's jaw hanging in disbelief. Our guy then gives the scrawny bastard a deadly stare to remind him that over 9 million won has already been repaid. So if you do the math, they're the ones who should be paying him interest. With another punch that makes the bastard cry like a baby, Dojin tells him to deliver a message to his boss. Dojin is coming for a visit. The scene then cuts to a bustling shopping mall. There we see sweet little Lee Eun-young lighting up in a teddy bear store. Dojin brought her here for a shopping spree. Today she's free to get anything she wants. You know, our boy wasn't always this soft-hearted in his previous life. It's the original Dojin's memories that revitalized his dry emotions. His heart warms seeing how kindly Dojin treated Eun-young even though she's only his half-sister. So now he wants to keep doing the same, giving all the love he can muster for this little girl. The little one finally chooses a stuffed toy she really wants. A small but cute bunny. She picks it modestly, making sure she isn't being extravagant. But Dojin picks an even bigger stuffed toy for her. He doesn't want her to hold back at all. It's her day and she can pick whatever her heart desires without thinking twice about money. They both treat themselves to some good food too. As they enjoy their meal, an unfamiliar voice suddenly calls out our boy's name. It's a middle-aged woman followed by a group of bodyguards. This chubby hag seems like yet another trash talker who loves to hate on our boy. First, she criticizes his lousy sense of fashion. Then she questions the girl sitting next to him. She's bold enough to throw a jab, claiming he must have knocked someone up and had this girl just like how his own mother stepmother brought him into this world. Of course, these sharp insults infuriate our boy beyond measure. Meanwhile, Lee Eun-young has no clue who this lady is or why she's trash-talking so casually. The woman then promptly turns her attention to the girl and asks her name. The girl introduces herself as Lee Eun-young, which makes this hag realize she's Dojin's sister. Out of habit, the woman throws another jab at her clothes, calling her a mess. She doesn't even spare their deceased mother. All of this is gnawing at our boy's nerves badly. But for some reason he holds it in, refusing to lash out despite her provocations. Even this ugly woman is shocked at how Dojin is keeping his composure, not falling for her traps. So, she decides to go one step further. This vile woman is bold enough to ask a child if she knows the meaning of harlot. Well, that's the last straw. Dojin snaps and calls her an ugly woman from the tribe of orcs. Naturally, the woman is left wide-eyed and speechless, caught completely off guard. Let's add some context to why Dojin tolerated her this long. You see, Dojin was born an illegitimate child and lived in poverty. At the tender age of 7, his mother died and he barely managed to reach his father's house. With his father marrying a new woman, he was shunned by everyone. Things worsened when his father's legitimate wife gave birth to a son, and Dojin was ignored completely. Eventually, he was kicked out of the very house he lived in. So he grew up with his half-sibling at his grandmother's home. As our MC reflects back, he feels pity for the original Dojin, who endured all this pain yet still tried to keep a smile on his face like nothing was wrong. But now he wants to change everything. Seems this woman is his stepsister, which explains why he held back, but he won't tolerate her anymore. He recalls how he once shared a roof with this orc of a woman, and she's just as disgusting as ever. Not only is her personality vile and her appearance orc-like, she's also dumb as a rock. He crushes her spirit further by dropping brutal truths. She's a wreck with an inferiority complex, projecting her insecurities by calling others ugly. She's just a gold digger obsessed with appearances, and that's the reality the world should know. As he continues roasting her mercilessly, the entire shopping mall watches, captivated as though they're witnessing a show. The orc lady is furious and about to lose it. But then Dojin's stepmother arrives. Seeing her mom, the orc lady rushes over like the whiny brat she is, complaining how Dojin just shut her down with words. But her mother is aggravated by the whining and silences her with a cold glare. Not going to lie, bro's stepmother is something else. At first I even thought the fat orc lady was his stepmom. The elegant woman turns her attention to Dojin and greets him with utmost grace, inviting him to return home and spend some time with family. But Dojin knows all too well this facade is fake. After all, she's the one who caused the most misery and unrest during the 12 years he lived with them. She continues bringing up memories Dojin never wants to recall, triggering his PTSD and putting him in full serious mode. With a tone colder than ice, our guy tells her to get lost. That's a major slap to her dignity, being dismissed so sharply by someone younger. She twirls around and leaves with what little dignity she has left. She wasn't expecting him to clap back so hard. She's left wondering if this is really the same boy who used to lower his head even when she slapped him for no reason. Her daughter follows after her, their bodyguards tagging along like NPCs who just watch the main character cook. Let's shift back to our boy. It seems these two women totally ruined the moment he was having with Yoon-young, so he decides to leave as well. His reaction to his step-family was intentional. He wanted to make one thing clear. The weak Dojin who couldn't speak up for himself is gone. It's time his trash family realizes that. We then cut to a Mercedes speeding down the road. Inside the car sit the stepmother and her daughter. The daughter is furious at her mother for leaving quietly instead of putting Dojin in his place. She vents her frustration and curses him for the humiliation they suffered. The mother, however, demands an answer from her manager. Why is Dojin still alive? The bald-headed subordinate has no clue. It doesn't match the reports. The woman snaps, screaming how it's impossible for him to be alive when they made sure the job was done. The poor man assures her he'll look into the matter again, and this time make sure the job is executed properly. Meanwhile, the clueless daughter has no idea what her shady mother has been plotting all along. She's rattled just hearing her mom casually talk about killing. Eventually, the mother poses a question to her daughter, wondering if she has feelings for Dojin. This catches the spoiled pig off guard, making her blush and flustered. No way she has a crush on our MC. Actually, she's just worried about Dojin dying because if grandpa or dad find out, they'll all be in serious trouble. The mother grabs her daughter by the mouth so hard that she silences her, drilling into her to stay the hell away from her business. The mother is dead set on claiming Dojin's life with no plan to spare him, especially not after he dared to talk back to her. Getting rid of him is the best revenge she can think of. A decade ago, the world took a turn into chaos with the appearance of the rift. This terrifying dimension gave birth to monsters spawning from its portal, driven by the single objective of slaughtering humans on sight. Their terror never stopped. It was ceaseless and eventually demolished the world, leaving scars of destroyed cities engulfed in flames. However, just as the dark forces appeared, so too came the light in the form of valiant warriors known as heroes. With their emergence, the first discovery of mana stones was made from the bodies of defeated monsters. monsters. Back to the present. Dojin's on the move, reflecting on how mana stones quickly shifted the world's dependence from traditional energy sources. Because of their key role, nations centered their attention on the emerging rifts, essentially staking claim to them so they could extract resources. With the current state of the world, all industrialization is now completely reliant on the concept of gates and the strength of heroes, and because of that, the profession of a hero reaps enormous rewards. A consistent high salary can only be achieved by becoming a proper hero. Dojin arrives at his destination, the Yongjong capital establishment. I know that's a mouthful, but you'll soon see why he's come here. He steps into the building, and at first glance, the boss and his cronies look like your average run-of-the-mill thugs, trying to intimidate people with their ugly mugs. But Dojin stays completely chill about the situation. The boss puts out his cigarette and points out our boy's audacity. Not only did he beat the crap out of his goons, but he also had the guts to show his face at the door. It shows Dojin really doesn't give a flying fudge about anyone. He cleverly tells the organization's owner that in reality it's actually Dojin himself who has suffered the real loss. That statement sounds ridiculous to the boss, so he demands clarification. Dojin explains he's come here to receive his well-deserved compensation. After all, he's endured mental, physical, and material losses because of these clowns. With his strong, serious words, the boss notices one significant change in the boy's personality. Something is different. Dojin is no longer the soft-spoken spirit or gentle soul he once was. Added to that, this same kid destroyed the lackey the boss sent to his door. Naturally, the boss suspects Seo Dojin must have experienced a unique kind of awakening inside the gate. Despite this, the boss acts arrogant, telling Dojin his newfound confidence will become his undoing. The hypocrite accuses him of being overconfident and to back up his claims summons a group of grumpy men to intimidate him. Of course he can pack all the muscle he wants, but compared to the experience of a sword god, they're practically insects. The boss keeps running his mouth, saying that even awakened people end up dying like dead weight, like low-class heroes. The funniest part is that he still assumes Seo Dojin is nothing beyond the level of a D-class hero, and that his organization could easily stomp him. Meanwhile, Dojin lounges on the sofa, calm as ever, while five guys glare him down. Without a shred of hesitation, he orders the boss to sit the heck back down. The boss is astonished at his tone, especially when Dojin emphasizes with a serious face that he's not done talking. Hearing that, one of the men decides to grow a pair and challenge him. Amusingly, Dojin calmly removes his glasses, which only adds to their confusion. And then he gave the guy a Mike Tyson special straight into the guy's face. The poor dude is sent flying from the impact while his friends are struck dumb. But that's not all, the beating continues as Dojin knocks down another thug. Keep in mind, while he's dishing out punishment, he's also calmly making his points. He exposes the boss's secret shady business, operating under the guise of a money-lending firm. He decks an orange-haired punk while pointing out their counterfeit identification racket. Having landed the punch, he tells the boss he's searching for a hero ID to officially register and start making money. When the final guy swings at him, Dojin ducks and counters with triple the force, sending him to sleep. That's how he knocks out the entire group with his own special sleeping routine, works 100% of the time. Dojin presses on with his demands, insisting on a foolproof identification that won't cause him trouble in the future. The boss is left starstruck at what just happened in a matter of seconds. Our boy reminds him that he only has one day to forge it. Some of the men hadn't intervened, which is honestly a compliment, since they're the kind of NPCs who'd usually challenge God at level 1. The boss is tripping hard, re-evaluating Dojin's strength. At the very least, this kid appears to be B-class. He's so lost in thought that Dojin has to snap him out of it. He accepts the job. Finally, Dojin grabs his shoulder politely but contrasts it with an intimidating expression. He wants to know if Hiju, his stepmother, ordered the hit on him. Of course that's exactly the case, as we already know from her earlier conversation with her daughter and assistant. The boss is tongue-tied until Dojin squeezes harder, making him yelp in pain. Even his cronies look helpless for their boss. Also, they should seriously change barbers. Eventually, the boss breaks and reveals her heinous strategy. That cruel, scheming woman wanted to drain Dojin's bank account, forcing him into financial ruin so severe that he'd have no choice but to take his own life. That is the very definition of an evil plan, especially against her own son, even if cast aside. Those were her orders. Dojin listens, and after enough begging and crying, he releases the man, asking if that was also the reason they locked him inside the gate. The boss quickly claims innocence, insisting he had nothing to do with that. He even reveals he wouldn't have been paid if Dojin had died in the gate, which is at least a plausible reason. That alone gets Dojin thinking. He utters the name Kang Cheol, the very man who brought him into the gate in the first place. Effectively, Dojin demands every piece of information about him by tomorrow. With his 2 demands made, he leaves politely, shifting the entire atmosphere of the room compared to when he first entered. After that conversation, Dojin is left in deep contemplation. The real Seo Dojin Dojin only ever had one desire. He wanted to protect his little sister and his beloved grandmother no matter what. On top of everything that happened, it just added another layer of misery and showed the kind of life the poor kid had to endure while being helpless. But not to worry, because the sword god was ready to do what he must in order to set the record straight. The following day, guess what? Our boy was officially registered, and he also received a B rank rating, which was convenient, unlike all the other stories where the main character just ends up at the lowest possible rank for style points. Tapping the card on the machine, he proved the card's legitimacy because it synced his identity with the system. However, it warned him that the rank was still lower than the dangerous quest he was about to take. This was actually pretty annoying to our boy, who thought that maybe he should have forced the bastard to assign him a higher rank so that he wouldn't run into these problems. Despite the system's repetitive warnings not to enter a gate far above his level, Dojin didn't care and went in anyway. Let's talk about the specifics of the Night Island gate. It was actually just a B-rank gate, but the logic didn't mean a B-rank hunter could survive it. Heroes were always recommended to be a class higher than the gate rank for mission safety. Anyway, the scale of the dungeon was considered rank D, which meant it was spread out and would be difficult for solo hunting. But the words risk and danger didn't exist in our boy's dictionary. If anything, the worst that could happen was that he'd have to face off against an entire fleet of monsters in a narrow tunnel with little to no room. Dojin smiled at his first opponent, which was a giant serpent with a chaotic purple aura. For most heroes, this would be a sign of terror, but for him it was a sign of good luck as he prepared his gauntlets to get the battle started. Oh, and by the way, the serpent had a bunch of its friends too. Anyway, they did their best to attack, but it was pointless because our boy was such a killing machine that he snatched and collected the mana stones like the monsters never even existed. The Black Killing Viper was a class of monster known for its hyperactive paralysis poison that could knock anyone down even with the slightest contact. With that in consideration, Dojin charged, propelling himself at bullet speed and launched a full swing. In a short span of time, he sliced and diced the creature all over its body, splashing blood until he severed the monster in half. With the creature defeated, Dojin noticed his equipment. The gloves he purchased ensured the poison didn't get in contact with him, and for the price of 300,000 won, they were holding their ground. Returning to the hunting session, Dojin turned his attention to 4 more of these ugly limbless lizards and began blasting right through their heads with his powerful speed. More and more blood splashed out until the vipers were sent to the afterlife. Dojin stood there, busy searching for a bunch of magic stones by clawing into the monster's flesh. To his disappointment, there weren't any around, but this was according to the rules of the previous world. In that world, these monsters only had a drop rate of 3% for mana stones. This meant he had to hunt down at least hundreds of them for good loot. Walking along, he discovered skeletons lying around. You might think it was the boss, but it's a huge-ass snake. Anyway, Dojin thought it was a good thing this big guy appeared because now he wouldn't have to worry about getting lost anymore. Spiraling into an immediate strike, he planned to end the battle quickly and return home. But then an unexpected thing happened. Despite having successfully landed a brute strike, his punch didn't have any effect on the creature. Bro just gave him a tattoo on the head instead. While he was in the air and unable to dodge, the creature bashed him into the wall with its tail. Dojin sat there, crash-landed. It probably gave him a reality check about the boss monster's strength. The creature whipped out its poisonous fangs and hissed at him like the average girlfriend when she's hungry. It attempted to bite him down, but luckily he evaded. Using the momentum of his evasive maneuver, he bolted right back into motion with a powerful punch that connected with the creature's body and left more cracks against its hard shell. From this second attack, one thing was made clear to him: the boss monster had an unusually tough exterior, making it a greater challenge than the rest of the vipers he had disposed of. The shell was so powerful at his current level that he couldn't penetrate it with one strike alone. This reversed the situation on him, making him question if he should aim for a different battle strategy. At his original strength, the sword god would have mopped the floor with this beast. But then suddenly he noticed something: the sword of the warrior who lost his life fighting the boss. And now you guys are about to know why he's called the sword god and not the fist god. Even though the weapon was extremely worn out after the fight, he grabbed hold of it, believing that a sword was only as competent as its wielder. With that knowledge in mind and the blade armed in his hand, he walked toward the monstrous snake. The creature propelled itself forth to strike him down again, bursting with incredible speed. Dojin responded by leaping high into the air, proudly declaring that the creature should be honored that he was going all out to kill the beast with a sword. Despite the sword's crap condition, this guy unleashed so many flashing cuts in the span of a few strikes that the snake's body was left eviscerated. The serious fight turned into a funny conclusion, with the snake dying in the background while our boy's sword was reduced to dust. It was a good thing he wiped the creature out before the blade gave up completely. With the boss monster dead, Dojin thought of a smart idea that I don't really see many other protagonists implement. He took one of the creature's fangs, believing it could be refined into a nice short sword. Considering this his reward for the journey, he exited the gate. By the time he stepped out, it was already a starry night outside. He had spent more time in the B-rank gate than he thought, and with the way things turned out, it only pushed him further to pursue and restore his strength back to full. He was also a bit happy that his old friends didn't get to see this weaker version of him, because that would have been embarrassing. Back from the hunt, he went to appraise and sell the magic stones. Before him, there was another hero who came to present his great stash of mana stones. The cheap-ass receptionist treated him like crap and pointed out that the commission rate was the same at 40%. Even the innocent guy could sense the scam behind that overly high rate. He even called it out, stating his concerns and calling himself a normal guy. The receptionist, just like he did with Dojin, clarified that their rate was actually the lowest among all the appraisal trades. The gate center's rate was 5%, but that was without taxes. From the perspective of the sleazy appraiser, this was a great deal for heroes to earn good money. The cash was handed to the hero, who didn't really complain much except for concerningly asking about the dude's messed up face. The funny thing was how this guy was still repeating the same script even after getting his face bashed in. Bro played it off, stating that a psychopath first obliterated his guards and then left him with this treatment. The hero thought it was actually the fault of the receptionist for keeping low-ranking guards around at the C-rank level. After all, rank wasn't the only thing that mattered in their world. Skill played a huge role too. Rank was actually a false representation of one's abilities and only updated to keep the system intact. The hero wisely mentioned that people of the same rank had a huge variance in skills and abilities, so they couldn't all be treated the same. The joker of a receptionist just wanted him to stop yapping and leave already, which he did, offering to help the little dude out if he ever needed something. As he left, our boy walked right past him, looking as cold as ever. Upon seeing him once, the receptionist flinched and bugged the hell out. He pointed at Dojin, shouting that this was the psychopath that made a mess out of him. Turning back to face them both, the hero was actually pretty impressed. He noticed our boy's lean physique for his height. Still, the fact that he made a mess of the guards spiraled the man to gear up for a fight, questioning if he was the troublemaker. The one thing I liked about this guy was that he wasn't offended over petty reasons. He genuinely believed that Dojin was misusing his powers as a hero by bullying civilians in his normal life. The receptionist enjoyed the show, knowing this guy was actually a 7-year veteran hero. If something happened here, the man had plenty of connections he could use to drag Dojin down by name. Without giving a damn about who he was, our boy turned back and simply told the boomer to piss off. This only provoked the guy further because now it really looked like Dojin was challenging him. Dojin asked if the guy was looking for exact revenge. Hearing those words, the veteran hero was provoked. However, being a responsible hero and with all his experience, he knew it was unwise to take battles against other heroes, as it almost always resulted in deaths. It's actually an even higher rate of death than a fight against monsters. Recalling that fact, Dojin calmly turns his back, leaving the receptionist speechless. Dojin turns to the sleazy appraiser and asks if he's got a problem he wants to bring up. Before the guy can answer, he tosses a bag full of magic stones to appraise and convert into money. These precious shiny stones are all high-grade magic stones, which really begs the question of who this guy really is from the receptionist's perspective. After calculating, the total comes to 150 million. It seems like a lot at first glance, but to Dojin it's far too little for a single day's worth of hunting. He asks for the cash, but the receptionist reminds him of the commission rate they need to calculate beforehand, which draws a scary look from our boy. Remembering that the rate is only 1% in their deal, he cools down and tells the guy to hand over the rest of the amount. Inside the mind of the hilarious appraiser, he wants to beat the hell out of the guy for having so much audacity, but that's only in his imagination. Speaking of which, the receptionist explains that there has to be approval from upper management for such a huge amount. Without wasting another breath, Dojin demands that he get the approval immediately. The guy quickly phones his boss, whispering the details of the situation. But before he can smoothly wrap up a deal, Dojin snatches the phone and directly tells the boss to hurry up with the payment. The boss is fine with doing so but asks for the phone to be handed back to the employee. Returning it with pleasure, Dojin accidentally smashes the phone into the wall. The employee trembles at the sight of his shattered device as Dojin instructs him to quickly prepare the money now that things are cleared up. And that's how the receptionist prepared numerous bags full of cash for the transaction. By the end, the guy is left devastated at being forced in such a way. Maybe you feel pity for him, but remember, he scams nearly half of what ordinary heroes earn after risking their lives. He's a scumbag. 10 minutes later, the boss storms into the store, enraged that his employee wasn't answering the phone. The hilarious part, the receptionist immediately throws in the towel and resigns on the spot. The boss then sees the smashed phone on the wall, giving him a clear idea of what went down. Seeing this, he pulls out his own phone to call Julian, requesting that she come at once. Julian appears as a famous young woman with striking purplish-pink hair. She's so recognizable in public that people cheer her name. Who knew Julian, treating her like a celebrity? Not to mention, she looks stylish as hell in her outfit. She arrives at the store, stunning the receptionist with her presence, greeting him with a smile. There's a big reason why everyone's making such a fuss about her. She's the country's 4th S-rank hero, nothing short of amazing. Rumors have spread that she's the niece of the boss, but he still questions what she's doing here. Confirming the claims, Julian explains that she came on behalf of her uncle's request to deal with a reckless hero. Intrigued, the stylish S-ranker sits down, ready to hear what's going on. In the next scene, we find our boy with his absolutely ripped body meditating in the sun. It's true that he's been hunting all day, and yet the rewards he reaped weren't amazing. With things going this way, he's worried about the future. First and foremost, he needs to reach a level where he can clear S-rank gates on his own. That means training to restore his original strength. Dojin's biggest challenge in this current life is that unlike his previous world, the mana density here is thin. Even if he does his best to gather mana at his current rate, it will take at least 3 years to come close to his original strength. Longer if things get rough. On the bright side, he could aim for better battle equipment. But the issue is that even the worst equipment costs hundreds of millions, making it a waste of money. Suddenly, a chill runs down his spine as he senses a dangerous presence. Fixating his sight on Lee Eun-young, he grabs the little girl at full speed and demands that everyone go inside immediately. Back inside, he shuts the room as his grandma anxiously questions what's happening. The entire structure shakes with a loud quake, making his grandmother flinch and ask in terror if it's an earthquake. Little Lee Eun-young panics, but the truth is something only our boy knows. This isn't just an earthquake, it's something else. Dojin senses the sharp, violent energy outside. A rift has just cleaved open into their world, manifesting directly on top of their house. Rushing to handle the problem, he tells his loved ones to stay inside as the situation outside is too dangerous. At full speed, he cuts toward the entrance of the rift, the last thing he hears being the cries of his grandma and his sister calling out his name. The scene switches to the Seoul Hero Association, where members are immediately alerted to the sudden emergence of a rift over the Mapo region. It appeared just 63 days after the last one. Realizing that the White Lion Guild is the closest to Mapo, the manager instructs his staff to contact the guild and alert nearby heroes to contain the situation. Upon closer inspection, he discovers the rift appeared on top of a residential home. This is a tricky situation because if a civilian enters the rift, they're practically guaranteed death. Not to mention, the rift won't allow anyone else to enter afterward, and if the person inside dies, it will trigger a monster wave in 10 days, wreaking havoc on the region. The wave would become so uncontrollable that Seoul's safety would be fully jeopardized. The manager is curious about the person who entered the rift. Turns out they know So Dojin has taken action as he's the resident of the home. According to his grandma, he entered to protect his family. From this they assume he isn't a hero, which complicates matters because the chances of an ordinary civilian returning from a rift are nearly impossible. This leaves the entire staff in despair, helpless to act. The next scene shows Dojin's furious stepmother, Hee-ju, seething at the news of his awakening. She can't believe it. Her assistant reports that while he hasn't officially registered with the Hero Association, they've confirmed he awakened from his last gate experience. This frustrates her because Kang Cheol was supposed to finish the job but instead made her target stronger. Enraged, she smashes her fist on the table, questioning why they couldn't manage to kill him themselves. The fact that they also took money for a failed job only fuels her anger. Roaring at manager Lee, she declares her frustration with Kang Cheol, sending him a message if he doesn't kill Dojin personally, he'll owe her 10 times the amount in return. But to her surprise, her assistant reveals they may not even need to contact him anymore. A new rift has appeared directly on top of Dojin's house, and since he entered, it's almost certain he won't make it out alive. Hee-ju is delighted, calming down as she orders the assistant to monitor the situation until more news arrives. Meanwhile, our boy has just arrived in the rift's domain. It's a forest, specifically the forest of Petishua, the same place he once enjoyed in his youth. The forest is recreated exactly as he remembers, even the rich mana inside carrying the same weight. Following the path, he smiles at the sight of the mighty world tree. This divine tree exudes pure mana, the very core of the world's stability. When the old world fell, it began with this tree being incinerated, forever disrupting the flow of mana. But here in this rift dimension, the tree remains intact, exactly as he remembers it. Though unaware of the cause, one thing is certain: he has a chance to reclaim the mana he lost by absorbing it from the tree. Meditating beneath its excellent flow of mana, our boy's strength becomes clearer and clearer. He spent more than 3 days sitting exactly like this, forgetting to eat, drink, or even tend to his bodily needs. 10 whole days passed, and all he could focus on was harmonizing his breathing. By the end of the 10th night, trouble came looking for him and disrupted his meditation. These alien-like creatures are called the Volcano, and they've come to burn the tree just like they did in the past. Only this time, our boy is there to prevent the tragedy from happening again. The creatures lunge forward to attack him while Dojin regrets not having a water element sword to wipe them all out with ease. The burning monsters roar as they make their way toward him, but our boy is overflowing with mana now, so much so that he no longer cares about a weapon. He himself is the weapon, and those hands are rated E for everyone. Extending his hand toward the monsters, he exerts so much authority from his mana alone that it knocks one of them down. The second creature is stunned by his ability. Let's break down what just happened. What he used there is called mana release, and it's not exactly telekinesis. It's a blaster type attack that detonates raw mana as a strike. It had been a long time since he used this ability in such a way, considering he had been low on reserves all this time. Anyway, the Volcano creatures aren't done yet. To retaliate, they release charged blasts from their mouths. These pulsing laser beams shoot straight toward our boy, who appears calmer than ever. His mana alone is enough to shield him from damage. Stepping toward the creatures ignited with a burst of mana, he remarks that he's finally protected the world tree. Now he's ready to play around a bit and enjoy the fruits of his training. The ugly bastards prepare another energy blast attack, but our boy quickly catches two of them and forces their mouths shut. Their own attack builds up inside until it explodes, leaving behind a headless corpse of flames. The bodies wither away, dropping two valuable magic stones for him to claim. But that's only a couple of them down. Dojin is ecstatic, thrilled to unlock something called the Eternal Ember. After defeating these monsters, joyfully cutting his way through and smacking them down with a grin, he's finally glad to steal a massive load of mana stones from them. The one-sided slaughter continues until he wipes out every last one. Dojin has basically hit the jackpot with how many stones they're dropping. Among them, he also discovers a small coin or seed glowing gold. This is the Eternal Ember, which he picks up in his hand. With this, he regains control of even more of his power as he crushes the ember and unlocks its flames. Normally, the ideal strategy here would be to keep absorbing mana from the world tree. However, his body has already reached its physical limit from mana absorption. The second method is absorbing the ember itself, which completely alters the state of his mana, transforming it into fire mana. And he does exactly that as his body erupts with a rush of flame energy. In his previous life, he had no need for this and ignored the Eternal Ember entirely. But now it's required for him to absorb them fully, and it takes about 10 minutes just to complete one. Luckily, he's collected a whole batch, so his goal is to absorb as many as possible. Meanwhile, the appearance of the rift sparks public interest. Reporters swarm around his house while agents and association staff protect the area. Bang Seong-gu is furious at one man's arrogance for entering the rift prematurely. Then we meet another key figure, Kim Hyun, our protagonist with blue hair. He sympathizes with Dojin's decision to save his sister, but Seong-gu doesn't buy it. Instead, he accuses Dojin of rushing in like a greedy fool, ignoring the consequences. If Dojin were to die in the rift, the entire place would become a detonation ground for monsters to pour out. That's the real issue. Kim Hyun asks for Gilma's input, but apparently Gilma has decided to just stick to protocol. Kim Hyun also questions the recent rise of rifts appearing across the globe in places like the US, China, Switzerland, Turkey, and the UK. Gilma is having a hard time managing them all at once, especially since this phenomenon doesn't happen every day. Some nations easily contain the threat, but South Korea is facing a disaster all thanks to one man. Seong-gu is so pissed that he wants to beat the crap out of the guy inside and is begging the rift to spit him out already. Speaking of the gargantuan Purple Gate, 28 days have passed since its first appearance. The same amount of time Dojin has been inside. The Hero Association is panicking, already classifying the threat as a level 1 wave. Dojin's identity hasn't been revealed yet for privacy reasons, so the public only knows him as an ordinary person. But while the world is clueless, the boss of a money-lending organization catches on quickly. His assistant confirms the report, verifying Dojin's involvement. Kim Eon, the right-hand man of the president Wang Chang, is curious about Dojin's chances of survival. The assistant claims that an ordinary person has less than a 1% chance of survival, but the mere mention of Dojin as ordinary makes Chang laugh. After all, that same ordinary person put his men in the hospital and left them bandaged for weeks. From the world's perspective, they're vastly underestimating him. Chang then asks about the survival chances of an awakened individual. For that, his assistant explains it depends on the hero's level, making it hard to judge without proper data. Even Chang admits that combat ability differs from survival ability, and a rift makes things far more complicated. But one thing is certain, the bastard hasn't changed his ways. Chang wants to protect Dojin's family, but not for noble reasons. Nah, this scumbag intends to sell the organs of his loved ones in case he doesn't make it back. And even if he does, he's going to pin the blame of debt on him for taking care. This guy is the embodiment of a leech. The scene transitions to the mesmerizing world tree. Here, our boy is going full speed into his training arc as his body is now thriving with flame mana. He doesn't even know how much time has passed, but he's been grinding by absorbing hundreds of the fire stones. With this, he's acquired so much fire mana that he can use it and manipulate it in any way he deems fit. Not to mention his resistance to the flames has increased as a side effect. Comparing his past self with his current self on the basis of fire attribute alone, he thinks he's surpassed his past self in a small capacity by mastering this ability. Embracing the world tree, he shares a tender moment with it. It's always served him in the time of need, even in the past and even now. Because of that, Dojin is grateful for everything it has done for him. As for his mana stones, he's made up a small bag using vines to store them all. With the stones collected and stashed, Dojin fully understands that he'll probably never get to see the angelic tree again. But even still, he's hoping for their paths to cross if the divine tree ever finds itself in danger, because when that happens, he will be ready to protect it with his life. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I really, and I mean really enjoyed this gentle scene. That night, Dojin finally steps out into the outside world, emerging from the rift as a whole. Luckily, he doesn't sense anyone to be around. Suspecting that most people probably thought he already died inside and that a monster wave would pop out at any time. However, he does detect the presence of someone strong nearby. Deciding to chase them down, he rushes to find the source. Shortly afterwards, he stumbles across the two agents, one pissed off and the other relaxed, both Kim Hyun and Seon-gu from last time. Now he understands that these guys probably represent the association from their outfit alone, which means in the off chance he gets caught, things will get really problematic. To combat that issue, he whirls up a ball of flame and chucks it into the air with a forceful lunge. That attack winds up finding its way across the building, resulting in a loud explosion upon detonation. Both Kim Hyun and Seon-gu were on red alert the moment they heard the crashing sound. Realizing that it's actually fire, they decide to chase after it. There they discover a bunch of people standing in horror. Seon-gu questions what the hell is going on in the chaos. Meanwhile, our boy is impressed with his flame powers so far. Its precision is good, so it will do him wonders. In the memory of his old friend called Tusk, he wonders if the mage would be impressed by his current level of flames. After all, Tusk was known to be the strongest fire mage on the continent, and they shared a good bond. Suddenly, Kim Hyun's sharp senses alert him to look for the rift. It appears to be acting up and right before their eyes. It disappears into the mist. Both of the agents rush to the site to see what's going on. When they arrive, they can't believe that the rift's connection to their world is no more. As for our boy, he's just making his way to his next destination without any problems. News breaks out the following morning concerning the state of the rift that lasted for a month in Mebo. It is announced that the rift disappeared 29 days after Seo Dojin entered the zone, proving the concerns of the Hero Association to be wrong about the monster wave. They have no idea about the unexpected disappearance of the rift, and they're currently investigating what went down. They also have trouble dealing with the cause of the fire that broke out at the time of the rift's disappearance in a junkyard. Now this leads most people to believe that Seo Dojin is dead and that this is just the consequence of his own actions. Unbeknownst to them, our boy is hidden in plain sight, observing the conflicting opinions of the people as some are sympathizing with the boy who lost his life. Unfortunately, the disappearance of the rift is devastating news for our MC. He's heartbroken that he can't interact with the World Tree anymore. Even though he can't protect the World Tree, there is still one other thing he can protect in his life. This brings us right back to the HCS capital. Inside, the idiots are busy celebrating the death of Dojin, believing they can easily get rid of the old granny and his sister afterwards. Changs is just the kind of guy to squeeze people to death after all. One bastard even talks about letting the little sister grow up so they can use her in other ways. While they're chatting without policing their own words, a familiar voice greets them and demands to see their boss. The scene cuts there and we shift to Chang humming and going about his day. Satisfied that Dojin is finally out of the way and dead for good, his assistant reviews their appointments for today. Apparently, he's free for the most part except for a lunch with another CEO. Hearing that, he's happy because tonight he can enjoy partying to his heart's content at a club under Miss Kang. It's basically senseless chatter until he steps into the building, and as he climbs the stairs, he finds his men being tossed around like playthings. Their blood is splattered everywhere, and the cause of it all is someone he presumed to be dead. Our boy throws him to the ground and tells the guy to crawl back to him like a dog. That bone-chilling order makes the president of the company quiver. Our boy acts like the real leader of the group and takes his seat in the chair. He then repeats his command to the ignorant Chang, who is still processing the weight of that shameless order. Without wasting time, he crawls like a dog. Ruthless as ever, Dojin then orders him to bark as he deserves to be treated like an animal. His loud and clear command has Chang whining in humiliation. It takes him a second to bark successfully, but our boy is not satisfied. He personally makes sure to turn him into an animal by forcing him to bark repeatedly for everyone to hear. The president is reduced to being less than human, just like the people he once treated that way. Dojin points out that scumbags like him only act obedient on the surface but end up backstabbing you the moment they get a chance. Declaring his filthy name, he chillingly tells the man that his life has been filled with experiences dealing with second-rate humans like him. Pleading and begging for mercy, Chang promises to serve like a loyal dog if necessary. But Dojin has heard enough and delivers a heavy slap across his face. Just that single strike is enough to knock the wind out of him and make him spurt blood. His assistant watches the scene unfold until his name is called. Dojin addresses him as the new boss of the company and advises him to stop working under a bastard like Chang. Knowing how easily men like this turn their backs, he orders the assistant to kill Chang with his full permission. Of course, it's a task too much for a competent servant like him. He apologizes and objects, stating that their leader has many connections, so things will get really bad if he's the one appointed boss instead of Chang. On his behalf, the assistant pleads with Dojin to spare the guy just one more time. However, Dojin doesn't want to play around with meaningless words in front of them. He suggests wrapping Chang's body in a barrel and erasing all evidence by shoving it into the endless ocean. After all, that's exactly the kind of thing these guys excel at doing. Seeing as the boss's men aren't willing to comply, our boy takes a different approach. Dojin threatens the entire group that he'll toss everyone into the gate as monster food if they don't carry out his order. Just the mere mention of that has Chang reduced to a pathetic mess. He can't take it anymore and keeps begging for his life, promising he won't ever betray and will always serve under Dojin. Now this puts the hero in a bit of contemplation. Although he could kill Chang right here and rid himself of all his problems, something about him has changed in this life. Admitting it himself, Dojin has grown softer compared to his merciless past self, so this time he agrees, offering the man a hand. I just know Chang is about to become religious as heck after this, praying he never gets on Dojin's nerves again. He goes on to shake the hero's hand, promising to serve unconditionally from now on. But wait, something is strange. Why is his hand engulfed in steaming hot flames? Yes, though Dojin has softened, he's still ruthless. Looking him dead in the eyes, he reminds the scumbag that this is his final chance. Dojin then proceeds to rip his hand off clean, reducing it to a charred paste. By the end of the meeting, he walks away, ignoring the agonized cries of the president. He does leave them with a final warning: if even a single one of them dares interfere with his family again, Dojin will personally ensure their deaths. As for their new job, they are now forever responsible for protecting his family. Now that's how you handle traitors. Officially speaking, the man known as CO Dojin was just a blip in existence that vanished along with the rift. In reality, he's actually dining at a local fast food place. The government, Hero Association, and all kinds of media outlets quickly moved past him like yesterday's news. They all treated the civilian who entered the rift as a dead man. Even if he came out and told the world he was alive, no one would believe him. Furthermore, resurfacing after a solo rift mission would only bring headaches and trouble his way. That subdued dog Chang is currently helping him find a new and suitable house so he can move leisurely for the time being. Dojin finally got the chance to feed his sister some delicious fast food. He also told her about their plan to move to a better neighborhood, and she could not be happier. Now she can attend kindergarten like kids her age and enter elementary school the next year. When the topic of school came up, little Lee Eunyoung's mood took a turn for the worse. Dojin was alarmed. He is used to slaughtering abominable beasts, but comforting a child is not in his arsenal. He was taken aback when his sister confessed that other kids tease her for being an orphan. Hearing his adorable sister's plight broke Big Bro Dojin's heart. If she doesn't want to associate with mean kids, she doesn't have to. Those little brats will get what's coming to them eventually. Finding out she wouldn't have to attend kindergarten just to be bullied anymore, Lee Eunyoung was ecstatic. Inwardly, Dojin is already devising a plan to send his little sister to a prestigious private school where no one would dare look down on her. That night, CO Dojin discovered that Kim Eunyoung had stashed his grandma and sister in some random motel while he was stuck inside the rift. The bastard nearly broke his back apologizing, reasoning that the motel was under their company's management, so it was safer than any other place. Dojin didn't have the energy to deal with Eunyoung tonight, so he simply entered the room and saw his grandma once more. Little Lee Eunyoung pounced on him with a bear hug, and grandma held his hand with tears streaming down her eyes. She was just glad to see her grandson return alive. At first, the hardened warrior was stunned, but once he felt the warmth from his family, he accepted their love with a smile. Little Lee Eunyoung had taken a liking to this restaurant, so they'd been dining there a lot. Today, she asked questions about Big Bro's job as a hero. When asked if she liked having a hero for a brother, Lee Eunyoung nonchalantly answered that she did not. While it's cool that heroes are strong and brave, they are also constantly in danger fighting terrifying monsters. Sometimes they even die, and little Lee Eunyoung just wants her brother to live with grandma and her for a long time. Dojin had been so used to mindless bloodshed, having someone worry about his well-being was a new feeling. In the harsh world of the past, he was the last human survivor fighting monsters and creatures beyond imagination. In the process, he lost many things. Now in this second chance at life, something incredibly precious has appeared by his side. Feelings he had long forgotten are resurfacing. In this world, maybe he can live happily, maybe he can finally enjoy a quiet life filled with joy and love. While he was feeling warm inside, Korea's Hero Association was in shambles. Tae-wong, founder of the Korea Hero Association and director of the World Hero Federation, had been stressing over the recent rift incident, or rather the lack of one. Their best people had investigated the site, but no new information was found. Feeling clueless about the state of his territory deeply frustrated the founder. It's not far-fetched to believe that a spontaneously disappearing rift could potentially reappear at any time. His assistant tried to agree with his worries, remarking that it might have been better if a wave had occurred, at least then they wouldn't have to deal with so many unknown variables. Director Tae-wong cut her off before his anger grew. While he was concerned about uncertainties, he thought it fortunate that no one had been harmed. Tae-wong is one of the top 100 most respected and strongest heroes in the world. It's widely speculated that if he ever ran for president, he would easily win with the most votes in history. His words and influence alone could topple domestic conglomerates if he wished. Thankfully, his interests lie neither in political power nor in corporate wealth. The only thing he truly cares about is the safety of his people. In other words, he's the real deal. Even if it takes time, he insists on a more thorough investigation of the rift's perimeter. The residents nearby have already agreed to sell their properties to the association, so that won't be a problem. As a consolation, Tae-wong wants to offer them more than market price for their homes, the least they could do after causing such inconvenience. All reliable sources have relayed that multiple rifts have begun appearing in different countries. No matter how you look at it, something big is happening. The United States and China have already entered the control stages of their rifts. Among the major nations, the United Kingdom is facing the biggest problem. While reliable and veteran heroes have been dispatched to clear the other rifts, the United Kingdom squad was simply hot garbage. Speaking of them, the month-long mission to get rid of the UK rift has finally crumbled in a catastrophic defeat. The UK rift wave occurrence has officially begun. The city and its people are going about their day like they normally would. Amongst the crowd was Seo Dojin, blending in with the pedestrians. Today, his destination is his favorite shop in the Hero Complex. When he entered the door, the dude manning the counter gave him a greeting by instinct but froze in shock upon seeing his face. Every strand of hair on his body stood in terror at the sight of the black-haired young man. Today, his manager is in the store, so he won't have to deal with this sadistic customer alone. The manager promptly closed the paper he was reading and lifted his gaze. His voice was controlled but tinged with anger. This is the guy who's been forcing his pushover cashier into buying low-grade crystals. Dojin lazily removed his backpack and tossed it on the ground. It's actually good that the manager is here so the sale of his magic crystals would proceed faster. Mr. Manager expected another batch of low-grade crystals to spill on the floor. He's not interested in such small-time business. Dojin does not like being turned away when all he wants is fair trade. The manager or any other sane business owner cannot afford to accept just a 1% fee. It would be better if the young man just left. Dojin asserted that refusing to do business with him would be a massive mistake that Mr. Manager would regret. The manager continued shooing the young man away, not even bothering to look at the bag. This is the last warning he'll give before things go down. In response, Dojin kicked the backpack, spilling its contents across the tiles. Being experienced crystal traders, both the cashier and the manager immediately recognized the properties of those rocks. That crude bag was actually filled with the hero's magic crystals, a legendary treasure that money cannot buy. Dojin has a rough idea of how much these things are worth. He knows he's holding premium stuff. You see, the hero's magic crystal was once used by an infamous Mexican drug lord, Querzaman, in New Age drug manufacturing. One night, a laboratory accident changed the course of his life and the world's perspective on such a little rock. The hero's magic crystal caused Querzaman to awaken as a powerful hero. Since then, the crystal has become a priceless item for hero awakenings and mana enhancement. Such an incredibly rare energy source can only be classified as an ultra-high-end product. As a power move, Dojin ordered the schmucks to pack their stuff back up, and he left. Mr. Manager quickly changed his dismissive and arrogant tone into a welcoming one. He even escorted the young man to their VIP seats and offered drinks while his cashier polished the crystals. Dojin enjoyed flipping the situation on its head. One second he was being driven away, the next he was sipping on an iced beverage. His opening demand was full price with a 0.5% commission. As soon as the manager showed any sign of balking, he threatened to pull the deal. In prior trades, Dojin had agreed to 1%. Now he was lowering that already abysmal rate even further, frankly just out of annoyance. In response, the manager lowered his head and tried to give the sincerest apology he could muster. But Dojin was tired of hearing empty apologies. They could either accept his rate or he'd take his business elsewhere. It was that simple. At the counter, the cashier was inwardly cursing Dojin for being such a rude prick. Seeing that his acting wouldn't convince the kid to give him a bigger cut, The manager locked in and gave a lengthy lecture about magic crystal markets and pricing. Dojin didn't have time to listen to such long-winded yapping. He finished his drink and got up from his seat, making the manager panic. Feeling the deal of a lifetime slipping away from his fingers, the manager offered a 9% commission. It didn't work, so he proposed 8%. This continued from 8 to 7, 6, and 5. In that range, his shop wouldn't be making any profit at all. While the manager was in the pits of despair, Sao Dojin pounced and agreed to settle for 1% out of respect for their past dealings. Inwardly, the manager wanted to scream and curse the blatant extortionist, but he just couldn't let go of the product. The next words out of Dojin's mouth nearly made the manager piss his pants in excitement. Aside from the one he brought today, he had about 7 more bags of those priceless crystals. With that, the contract was quickly produced and signed. After a few minutes of officiating the deal, 67 billion won entered Sao Dojin's bank account. That's about $48 million. At this rate, his 110 billion won house didn't seem so far off. The problem was that getting more high-grade magic crystals through normal gates was a time sink. If he could find a way to freely travel through rift zones, he could easily farm treasures like a madman. While looking at his phone screen, an administrative message was sent out to everyone in the country. The wave outbreak in the southern region of the United Kingdom had finally been announced to the general public. In the meantime, everyone was banned from traveling to the UK. After reading about a real problem in the real world, Dojin lost interest in messing with the shop manager. In the past, no matter the country or which association was involved, he might have intervened to seal the rift himself. But he's not that guy anymore. He has more fulfilling matters to attend to. Tonight, dinner is on Dojin and they're getting expensive meat. Little Lee Yunyung's mouth watered at the sight of pork and beef marbling over the grill. The expensive meat and succulent side dishes just kept on coming to the table. Worried that they were spending too much given the price tag on the menu, Grandma slowed down and asked her grandson if this was okay. 250,000 won for 100 grams is pretty steep. Dojin dismissed her worries right away. After making a killing with his crystal harvest, they could eat as much as they wanted, and it wouldn't even make a dent in his bank account. Lee Yunyung's first bite made her fall in love with the taste of the wildly luxurious beef. Dojin kept adding more and more to the grill as Grandma watched in apprehension. Hell, another package of fresh ribs, prime ribeye, strip loin and skirt meat was on its way to the table soon. At this point, the scale was just ridiculous. How could 2.5 people even finish that much food? While Grandma was underestimating the appetite of the protagonist. To ease her worries, little Lee Yunyung convinced Grandma to give the expensive stuff a try. Unable to refuse the offer of her sweet girl, Grandma caved. One bite of that expensive meat was all it took for all her worries to dissipate into nothing. Afterward, the happy family enjoyed their extravagant dinner filled with smiles and laughter. Unbeknownst to Dojin, an attention-grabbing young woman just entered the restaurant. The necks of the other guests almost broke wherever she passed by. The woman made a beeline towards Sao Dojin and decisively called his attention. She just wanted to talk with him for a moment. Nothing more, nothing less. Before she could elaborate on her reason, Dojin cut her off for interrupting his family's dinner. If she wants to say something to him, she should come back when the freaking meal is over. Julian pulled out the name card, hoping that the young man would change his tone upon her name. Much to his dismay, Dojin just kept on grilling and eating meat, disregarding her presence altogether. And so, the renowned S-rank hunter swallowed her pride and patiently sat in the restaurant's waiting room. With a star like her sitting within normal people's vicinity, she naturally became the center of attention. Men and women kept stealing glances at the woman standing at the pinnacle of heroism. She's not only fourth in the national rankings for S-class heroes, but most people would also even place her within the top 10 most beautiful heroes in the world list. Every civilian around was asking the same thing in their minds. Who the hell is making Julian wait? Ignoring the blatant whispers around her, Julian recalled the brief interaction she had just a few minutes ago. As far as she knows, Sao Dojin entered his first gate 2 months ago. He made it out alive and is now under suspicion of becoming awakened. He was widely believed to have died in the recent Mappo Rift incident, but here he is alive and eating with his family. Aside from all the details that don't seem to make sense, a single sharp look from the young man had an S-ranker like Julian on edge. A newly awakened guy cannot possibly reach S-rank in under 2 months, right? Even the oil tycoon Kafmor, who spent his wealth on magic stones, took about 5 months to reach the peak. Rationalizing what she felt, Julian reckoned that Dojin must have some kind of unknown special ability. Finally, Dojin, Grandma, and little Yunyung had filled their bellies and lifted their mood. Near the exit, Julian walked over to finally have a conversation with the mysterious young man. Before she could open her mouth to speak, another party sauntered into the restaurant with an air of superiority. Dojin's eyes turned sharper than usual at the sight of the man. This skeevy-looking bastard did not expect to see Dojin alive and kicking after their excursion in one of the deadly gates, the lunatic Kang Cheol. He's actually quite amused by Dojin's cockroach-like resilience. Even Julian seemed to recognize the troublemaker in a single glance. In the middle of the restaurant, tensions rose as silence filled the air. Dojin chose to ignore the bastard's shallow insults and called Julian over. Kang Cheol was taken aback to see an S-rank hero speaking with the cockroach. Dojin requested that she take care of his family for a little bit. All she has to do is flag a taxi so they can ride away and go home. It would be more convenient if they were far away while he collects an overdue debt with a mongrel. Thankfully, Julian is a very reasonable young woman. She did what Dojin asked and assured Grandma and the little girl that everything would be fine. She waved at them goodbye, but their concern was evident. Julian awkwardly stood there as the taxi departed. As soon as they sped away from the restaurant, a resounding and crisp sound of slapping echoed inside the establishment. With his loved ones out of the picture, Dojin could finally drop the act and slap him. He moved so fast that Kang Cheol did not even see his swing. He only felt the stinging pain in his cheek. Embarrassed by such a humiliating attack, Kang Cheol gritted his teeth and charged forth to retaliate. One of the servers tried to break the fight up, fearful that the Awakeners might destroy the whole restaurant if the conflict escalated further. Her reasonable request was met with unreasonable violence. Fortunately, she wasn't harmed too badly. Dojin calmly told everyone to get out and clear the room for their safety. Kang Cheol is really easy to trigger. He's a muscle-brained idiot who can't even think of good trash talk. For that, he was punished with another strike to the face. He was completely caught off guard, feeling a knuckle make contact with his head. Kang Cheol is the bastard who locked the original CO Dojin in a gate, leaving him for dead. Even though he was not the one personally slighted, our MC still harbors a deep resentment for this face, and he wants to talk. Kang Cheol, the goblin-looking goon, snickered as he brought up how that evil stepmother of Dojin's made the whole thing happen. Seeing that extracting info from this idiot was a lot easier than he thought, Dojin pulled his phone out and pressed the record button on the video app. He just needs a clear and concise recording of the confession, and his life will be a lot simpler in the future. Once again, Kang Cheol was insulted by his nonchalance. He gathered power in his fist, called Dojin's mother a whore, and attacked with unmatched intensity. He intended to finish the job he had failed. He wanted to kill CO Dojin once and for all. Unfortunately for the big goon, his primitive attacks were no match against the expert manipulation of chi. Dojin met the violent punch with a soft touch and sent the enemy's fist flying as though it had just hit an impenetrable bouncy barrier. Kang Cheol had never experienced something like this before. Normally, he would just brute force his way through anything and everything to kill. Now, it seems like he's going up against someone far beyond what he can comprehend with his tiny little pea brain. Suddenly, he was pushed off his feet. Dojin followed his body's trajectory like a hunter playing with his prey. Sounds of fists cracking a skull echoed throughout the restaurant as the server from earlier tried her hardest to dial the police. Before she could press the call button, a dainty hand pulled the phone away. With a bright smile, Julian assured the server that she would take care of everything, so there was no need to involve the authorities. The server was just glad to see a comforting face in the middle of her breakdown. Slaps, scratches, and punches landed throughout Kang Cheol's body, not giving him any chance to catch his breath. As far as Julian knows, this lowlife is a B-rank hero. With that rank, there are not many people who could beat him up so helplessly. Based on this beatdown, Dojin might be classified as an A rank. Well, even if that's true, the fight still seems a bit too one-sided. Before things could get any worse, Julian carefully called Dojin to stop for a moment. She's just worried that Kang Cheol might die if the beating goes on for longer. Deciding to listen to her words, he dropped the goblin goon's limp body on the ground and wiped his hands. Seeing as there's clearly some vendetta between the two, Julian asked the young man how much he knows about Kang Cheol. Dojin might not know the whole picture, but he knows enough about the bastard to exact vengeance. Julian warned him that this piece of dirt, Kang Cheol, is connected to Kang Cheong, an S-rank hero. Well, Dojin already knew that fact, and he didn't see any problems. Julian had never met anyone so reckless and insane. This dude doesn't even care about whatever consequences he might face at the hands of an S-ranker. Julian elaborated that Kang Cheong is very protective of his delinquent cousin. This restaurant incident will surely reach the ears of that powerhouse. When that happens, blood will be spilled. Dojin scoffed at Julian's worries. He's the last person who would be afraid of some hotshot S-ranker. More than the problems for the future, he's more annoyed at the fact that Julian knows so much about his life. Now that the goblin goon is down, Dojin's enmity has transferred to the nosy S-ranker. Face to face, the feral young man stared her down. Julian was not a pushover by any means. She won't cave from a simple, intimidating eye contact. Changing the subject, she apologized for the sudden visit and brought up her agenda. She was just asked by her uncle to come by and talk. After she found out about the bag of Hero's magic crystals he sold off, Julian wanted to get her hands on the rest. She is willing to buy every piece he has, no matter the price. Dojin warned her that it won't be cheap. He has a lot of precious treasures stockpiled after all. She assured him that the assets of an established S-rank hero are beyond normal people's imagination. Well, it's not like he's opposed to selling his goods. He just has one condition before transacting. It's nothing much really, just a little favor. At least for someone as renowned as Julian, that is. Elsewhere in the city, the sound of expensive alcohol bottles hitting the floor could be heard. Dojin's evil stepmother was crashing out upon learning new information about her allegedly dead stepson. Her people were so sure that the kid died in the rift. Yet now she's receiving word about how Dojin survived like a resilient cockroach. Press F for Baldy here. Having a boss like her can't possibly be fun. You can't blame him for the misinformation. Even the Hero Association labeled Dojin dead. Evil stepmother didn't want to hear excuses. She wanted actions instead. To make things worse, they just received news about Kang Chiol's defeat at the hands of Dojin. At this point, it's safe to assume that CO Dojin already knows who's really responsible for his attempted murder. Hearing that she might be implicated, evil stepmom gulped in terror. She's not afraid of Dojin. She's more concerned about the trouble it will bring when her father or husband finds out about her dealings. She can cover everything up, but if word gets out to the media, the group's stock price will plummet. So she ordered her people to intercept the media. If they mess up, T Group and W Group will surely cut all deals and advertisements. First and foremost, the police must also be on their payroll. In that regard, evil stepmom's people had already moved to cover all bases. Knowing that they had at least a little competence eased some of the weight on her shoulders. Ball director Lee then whispered that no matter how many cover-up jobs they do, it is not a fundamental solution to the real problem. On that note, the ball director might have a plan that could put an end to this headache. They just have to make use of Kang Chiol's cousin, the infamous Kang Yong. Even someone like Stepmom knew about the S-ranker. Kang Yong might be notorious as trash in the world of heroes, but everyone knew how close he was to his powerful cousin. In reality, Kang Chiol was just a pawn doing all sorts of dirty work under his cousin's orders. They were both sick in the head. If Kang Chiol got pinched by the police and smeared by the media, it wouldn't be a good look for the S-rank hero either. In fact, he had already taken action to deal with this public relations disaster. Evil stepmom made up her mind. She wanted to meet with Kang Yong as soon as possible. In addition, that dog Chang of HCS Capital had blatantly allied with the enemy. He was taking care of Dojin's family now. For that, stepmom wanted a prosecutor on the phone in a minute. Those who abandoned her camp had to pay the price in full. The very next day, we follow a group of heroes entering one of the 37 rift zones in Korea. Among those rift zones, 5 zones were being turned into secured gates. The rest could only be raided by heroes affiliated with hero associations on coordinated schedules. Today, Miss Julian was leading a team herself. With her S-rank ID, she had practically limitless entries at any gate. Among the diverse crowd of heroes equipped with fancy equipment and weapons stood a young man wearing a beat-up hoodie. Julian had chosen a ranker Julian in Ju Guild as a temporary group for the hunt. It was very rare to be a part of an S-rank's hunt, so they were hyped. Julian reasoned that she simply wanted to do something fun and stretch her muscles a little bit. In reality, she had to set up this whole situation just to give the young man in the back clean entry to the gate. CO Dojin agreed to sell the rest of his magic crystal stockpile at market price to Julian if she let him into the restricted rift zone. He just wanted to earn more money by hunting in higher level zones. While it was true that rift zones housed all sorts of treasures, going into such a difficult one for a guaranteed profit without fear was just insane. Well, she didn't really care either way. She just needed to get her hands on those hero magic crystals. After a few minutes of traversing a dark tunnel, the group finally came out the other side to a brightly wooded area. Unable to rein in her curiosity, Inju started bugging Julian about the real identity of the young man shadowing their party. Julian just introduced Dojin as someone she knew, but no one was buying that half-assed answer. Inju speculated that he might be Queen Julian's boyfriend. Tired of all the buzzing, she gave Inju a partial truth and confessed that the young man was there because she owed him a favor. It's not every day an S-rank hero owes someone. While the party was lost in their respective conversations, a giant shadow blotted the sun from above. Everybody turned their eyes to the skies and saw the beast. Being an A-rank guild, the Clio heroes instantly responded by drawing their weapons and getting into their respective positions. The first encounter was none other than the fearsome cockatrice. Like the expert raider that she was, Julian took charge and barked clear and concise orders. Jinju and Duyan were in charge of defense while Siono aimed for the legs. Before she could finish assigning everyone their roles, a figure blurred as he shot past everyone. With a single impactful leap, he closed the aerial gap between him and the flying beast. Dujin disregarded the long-winded group plans and leaped for a one-on-one with the bird. The guild heroes were slack-jawed. They had never seen someone so brazen. Gathering energy in his fist, Dojin prepared for first blood. Prior to his charge, Guildmaster Inju was stressing over her bad luck. They were barely inside the gate and a troublesome opponent had already shown itself. Before the group could organize and get into position, Dojin had already dropped his bag to the ground. While Julian was calling the shots, he was bursting through the air like a speeding bullet. He was an absolute speed demon. In one jump, he neutralized the bird's aerial advantage. Up in the skies, he took control of the field without a problem. His fiery energy was thick and burning. The overgrown chicken did not have the speed or reaction time to block the incoming attack. As a result, it was forced to eat a full-powered punch to the beak. Dojin landed in front of the group. He didn't even break a single bead of sweat. The cockatrice was on the verge of death, the mark of his fist visible on the side of its face. The guild people stood dumbfounded alongside their S-rank carry. They bore witness to the brutality of what happened next. Dojin lifted his leg and started stomping on the bird's head until it was reduced to meat paste. It might seem like too much, but killing a cockatrice requires a lot of force. With every stomp and kick, the sound of skull cracking and blood spurting mortified the group. Now Inju is really curious as to who that guy is. In all honesty, Julian wasn't really sure herself. All she knows is that Dojin is a really strong human. While calling him simply strong is a huge understatement. There are only a select few heroes who can do what Dojin just did. Killing a cockatrice in one blow is no ordinary feat. Julian downplayed the achievement by bringing up her sister. That woman belongs to that elite list of outstanding heroes. Still, Inju can't just get over the fact that a hidden powerhouse is among them. She watched the entire sequence and was in awe the whole time. Julian took note of the young man's monstrous power and decisiveness, her curiosity deepening. She turned to Inu with an impromptu change of plans. For now, she wants to go to the center with Dojin, leaving the rest of the group on the outskirts. Julian carefully approached the young man, expertly carving the cockatrice's corpse for loot. Before she could speak, he preemptively asserted that he wouldn't share loot with people who contributed nothing to the kill. Thankfully, Julian is not one to eye a few pieces of magic crystals. She just came over to propose that they go a bit deeper into the gate, heading somewhere more challenging and fitting to his current abilities. With a smile, he readily accepted the invitation to hunt and loot more. Julian knows the layout of this gate quite well, so she will take the lead. All Dojin has to do is follow closely so he won't get lost. Without warning, she sped off into the distance, her speed causing a sonic boom. Dojin calmly watched as her figure vanished into the horizon. After slinging his bag over his back, he took a running pose, storing energy in his muscles. With an instant first step, he kicked off with an explosion that almost blew the Clio Guild heroes away. Injun reckoned that if Julian is a bullet, then that man moves like light itself. Left by the two powerhouses, the miscellaneous heroes turned to their guild leader for their new plan. Of course, trying to follow those two ahead is utterly impossible. Today they must accept that they are sidekicks and small fries. Nevertheless, this is still a decent gate with plenty of monsters to hunt around the outskirts. In the outside world, normal people praise them as powerful A-rank heroes, but in front of a real S-ranker, they are not even worth mentioning. Julian and that man are leagues above the entire force of Clio Guild. Speaking of those two, their race across the woods is proceeding hastily. While maintaining breakneck speeds without much effort, Julian kept checking her flank for signs of Dojin. Upon seeing no signs of the guy, she started softening up and thinking that she might have overdone the initial run. While she was thinking of slowing down, Dojin suddenly appeared by her side, asking if they could go a little faster. Julian's concentration broke and she almost tripped. She had never experienced something like this before. Someone can actually keep up with her in terms of racing. When it comes to speed, she's in the top 2 in the nation, but that list might need to be updated given how Dojin is making her eat dust. A few moments later, he made a stop to tease her for being slower than expected when she was clearly running to flex her speed. While the S-ranker caught her breath, Dojin turned his eyes onto the view on the horizon. In front of them was a massive mountain range touching the heavens. When asked what was hiding inside that rocky range, Julian's expression turned solemn. That place is the lair of the Thrift's boss monster, the Caesarian. You see, this so-called Caesarian is a giant 20m monster resembling the draconian wyvern. Joyeon doesn't even want to entertain the idea of subjugating that beast. You typically need at least 3 combat-oriented S-rank heroes to even stand a chance against such a monster. One thing Dojin knows about Kassarian is that it has a chance to drop the imaginary grade magic crystal, a treasure just below the highest grade possible. Since such an enticing reward is waiting for him, he won't let it slip through his fingers. Obviously, Joyeon is opposed to such a reckless idea, while Dojin is fighting that draconic bastard with or without her. Joyeon watched as he fearlessly sped up, aiming to scale the mountains to slay the beast. She felt as though she did not have a choice but to follow him into insanity. Something grim awaits the duo inside the boss monster's lair, with him bursting with unfathomable confidence to take down a beast that easily gives 3 S-rank heroes trouble. It really shakes Joyeon to her core. Do you know what's even more shocking? When she arrives at the site, she finds the same creature, the Kassarian, dead at her feet. The fight's already over and she has absolutely no idea what the hell went down. Our boy casually plucks his knife from the creature's corpse, leaving her at a loss for words. Joyeon mirrors her shock. The creature he just downed isn't just any boss monster. On that note, she talks about a prominent hero known as Park Hae-yul who fostered a reputation for hunting down monsters like the Kassarians. Though he's an S-rank himself, the first time he went to hunt down the Kassarian, he was cautious enough to take 30 A-rank heroes along with him. And yet, even with all those precautions, the A-rank heroes didn't make the cut and were all slaughtered in the attempt. Park Hae-yul was the only known survivor of the group who clung to the edge of his life by the end of the boss fight. From that moment onwards, the guy decided to rematch with the same monster, only this time he was armed with 1 more S-rank and 100 A-rank heroes behind him. It's practically a small army at that point. The fight was brutal. They focused on piercing the creature's wings and negating its flight. The Kassarian of the time was then overwhelmed by a barrage of attacks from the heroes. Despite this, only a handful of heroes remained from that battle, the rest butchered by the beast's wrath. The damages they incurred that day were so prominent that Hale's guild, the Sweet Life, has yet to recover from it 3 years after the event. And yet, this one average-looking Joe has defeated the same Kassarian monster without much trouble. The funny thing is, with her constant glaring, he reminds her that she ain't getting any of these precious gems for standing around fighting the air. The remark may have annoyed her, but Joyeon is more focused on the ridiculousness of the man before her eyes. If she wasn't there to witness the battle, she would never believe in such a conclusion. The same terrifying Kassarian was taken down and obliterated in a single strike at the hands of one man. As for Dojin, my boy has successfully harvested the awesome-looking magic stone from the creature's body. He stares at it and tells her that he no longer cares about having an escort to guide him. From this point onwards, he's fine on his own. He also denies taking the rest of the valuables obtained from the dragon's body, such as its claws and teeth. Showing little to no regard for them, he turns back to reject her plainly, leaving the S-ranker stunned for life. Instead, he'd rather focus his energy on collecting the monster crystals. He even goes as far as to allow her to keep all of those valuables to herself as a form of payment. Joyeon takes a look at the creature for a moment and reaches the conclusion that she also doesn't need anything from the beast. It's evening now and the rest of his group is shocked that one guy managed to collect 3 bags full of magic stones. It's an unbelievable sight even for the competent A-rankers for their guild to have obtained the same amount. It would have taken them a minimum of 20 hours and from the quality of the ingredients even more than 3 days. It begs the question about the man's identity, and they're all staring down at Joyeon, who brought him along in the first place and yet appears just as confused as them. Based on Joyeon's own words, the A-rank guild master can't fathom how Dojin was able to beat the Kassarian without any proper equipment. With this accomplishment alone, he stands at the top of the hero ranks in Korea, unparalleled in his might. They really just said, our boy is built differently. The A-ranker even thinks that he might be the strongest in the entire world at his level. It amazes her. Speaking of the guy, an exhausted Dojin returns with more bags on him. With just 1 day of hunting, he's already collected so much stuff. At this point, the group is starting to think that no one will believe them if they reported this to the outside world. Dojin's godlike power is the definition of insanity to accept. Speaking of which, they're explicitly told not to drop a word of what happened here today in the outside world, something they have to ultimately accept. Her blush deepened, a clear sign of Park Hae-yul's effect on her. The scene shifted to Park Hae-yul's powerful strikes relentlessly pounding a sandbag. Each blow was delivered with tremendous force, his screams echoing his unwavering determination. He charged forward, landing an explosive punch that shook the training room. Exhaustion and fury etched themselves onto his face as the training concluded. Park Hae-yul, an S-rank hero in the Korean Hero Association and leader of the Sweet Life Guild, was approached by a man in a formal suit. He urged Park to remain calm, invoking the wisdom of the saying, "The frog that crouches the longest jumps the farthest." Patience, he explained, would only enhance Park's fame and reputation. Park conceded, determined to make those who underestimated him pay. The man assured him that his power would gradually build, culminating in an explosive moment when everyone would kneel before him. He emphasized that Park was uniquely positioned to defeat the monster Kassarian, a feat that would etch his name in history as the hero who triumphed with the smallest team. The Hero Association might even grant him exclusive hunting rights. A confident laugh escaped Park Hyel's as he acknowledged his superior knowledge of the monster. His gaze drifted to an old group photo, a stark reminder of his guild's decline over the past 3 years. Despite this, he remained convinced that he alone could defeat the giant flying monster. The man reinforced this belief. The narrative transitioned to another location showcasing a grand building and files bearing the name Seo Dojin. Kang Young, another S-rank hero and cousin of the defeated Chulwu, examined the documents with curiosity. They revealed that Chulwu had attempted to eliminate Seo Dojin by sending him into a rift, but instead of dying, Seo Dojin had awakened within it. Hong Heju, CEO of the T Group and second daughter of the W Group, had commissioned the hit. Kang Young wondered why such a wealthy woman would target someone like Seo Dojin, only to discover that Seo Dojin was an illegitimate child of the T Group, taken in at 7 and cast out after the birth of the witch's own child 6 years prior. Kang Young smirked, dismissing the importance of blood relations in the world of the wealthy. He learned that Chulwu's payment was a paltry 3 billion, remarking that the amount was too little. The informant added that Chulwu was left in a horrific state, scarred, blind, and near death. Kang Young, preparing to play golf, mused about the brutality of Seo Dojin's attack, contemplating how he himself would have maimed and crushed him. The mention of Mami Juan's assistance to Seo Dojin ignited Kang Young's fury. He demanded to know the nature of their relationship, suspecting a romantic entanglement or some kind of deal. The assistant hesitated, confirming only that Chulwu's testimony had quietly closed the case. Kang Young erupted, ordering the assistant to uncover the full details of their relationship. The assistant fled in haste. Kang Young, consumed by rage, hurled his golf club to the ground. He anticipated Juan's impending request for him to complete Chulwu's failed mission, a lucrative opportunity given her wealth. He grinned slyly, knowing she was a rich woman with plenty of money, so he'd benefit greatly from the situation. Meanwhile, Seo Dojin walked alone under the moonlight toward his new home, contemplating the superior effectiveness of hunting in rift zones. He realized that he would need Juan's help to enter and exit these zones for now. Juan made it known that the mana stone obtained from Kassarian would be kept hidden to avoid media attention. She gave Dojin the freedom to seek fame if he desired. Dojin smiled, handing her a bag of mana stones collected from the rift, while internally resolving to find an independent means of accessing rift zones. Dojin returned to the home prepared by Huang Chang, immediately sensing an unsettling presence. Examining the shoes at the entrance, he confirmed that strangers were inside. Suddenly, his little sister's joyful scream pierced the air as she spotted him. He turned to see men in black suits standing suspiciously behind Yun Yang and their grandmother. The man at the center exuded authority. His sister ran to him, clinging tightly and calling out in fear. Seo Dojin cautiously inquired about the men's identities and purpose. The seated man introduced himself as Prosecutor Park Hyeliang from the Seoul District Prosecutor's Office, informing Seo Dojin that he was under emergency arrest for involvement in Huang Changsub's illegal high-interest lending operations through HC Capital. The scene shifted to a towering government building. Dojin sat alone in a dimly lit room. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, accompanied by a voice discussing the compliant behavior of both Huang Changsub and Dojin. The door creaked open, and Park entered, still on the phone, expressing gratitude for concerns about his daughter's overseas studies and asking to extend sincere thanks to Director Hong as well. His gaze then fell on the thin, motionless figure seated across the room. His expression shifted and steely. He leaned down with a wide, menacing grin to wipe scum like Dojin off the streets. With a sharp thud, he slammed a heavy stack of documents onto the table, intending to bury Dojin under charges that would get him a minimum of 10 years, thanks to Huang Changsub's testimony. Dojin's eyes grew dark and heavy with fury. Huang questioned if Dojin thought he was fabricating all this. Suddenly, Dojin named Hong Heju. Chong froze, thrown off. He wondered who that was. Dojin went quiet, lost in thought. Huang Chang's side had already been crushed. He had kept quiet to avoid escalation. Chang clicked his tongue in irritation and paced closer to Dojin, wondering where a punk like him had heard that name. Leaning in threateningly, he made it known that Dojin's life was over. He was an idiot to think the prosecutors of the Republic of Korea were small fries. But at that moment, something flickered in Dojin's eyes, subtle but chilling. It sent a wave of dread crawling up Chang's spine. He instinctively stumbled backward, cold sweat forming on his brow. Chong clenched his teeth, struggling to find words before shouting that Dojin was a bastard. But the door creaked open again, cutting him off. Both men turned as another officer stepped in, holding a folder. Prosecutor Park was asked to step outside for a moment. Chang's voice echoed down the hall, baffled. His eyes narrowed as he glanced at the report in the man's hands, wondering if it was broken, A second voice confirmed that the device was functioning properly. Chang's fingers tightened around the page. The awakening scanner said he's a civilian, which was impossible. It was Seo Dojin. The assistant stammered that maybe the intel about his awakening was wrong. Chang's made it known that the data came straight from the TC Corporation's investigation, and couldn't be wrong. Dojin knew the name Hong Hiju, so who the hell was he? Inside the stark cold interrogation room, Dojin sat alone, his hands still bound. He let out a quiet sigh and his gaze sharpened, ice cold and bitter. He wondered if he should just burn it all down, thinking this is why people call Korean prosecutors the Justice Department's hunting dogs. Before he could sink deeper into that thought, the door opened once more. Dojin stepped inside, head tilted, curious as to what he was doing there. Still restrained, Dojin wished he knew. Dojin placed her hands on her hips, her gaze stern, warning him not to do anything reckless. She knew he was angry and confused, but if he used his powers now, the consequences would be severe. Dojin looked up at her, his eyes sharp yet calm, and inquired if she was there to help him. Dojin folded her arms, her expression unreadable, stating that it wasn't exactly helping. But now that she knew he was innocent, it changed everything. If she didn't know, that would be one thing. But knowing an innocent person was being framed, someone had to fix that. Dojin's lips curled into a faint, unreadable smile. Then Dojin leaned down, whispering in his ear that the Hero Association was launching an investigation and cracking down on illegal hero licenses, keeping a close eye on new rifts around Mappo. But his next question caught her completely off guard. What about his family? She froze for a moment, then forced a casual shrug, questioning if she looked like his secretary and why she would be looking after his family. Faced with his cold, unwavering gaze, she faltered, her eyes shifting away awkwardly. Shoving her hands into her pockets, she turned toward the door, stating that he was safe and should stop worrying. Dojin's expression softened just slightly as he nodded. Gratitude filled Seo Dojin as he expressed his thanks, promising to repay the debt. A faint blush rose to Dojin's cheeks as she glanced back, urging Dojin to be patient, assuring him that she would resolve the situation as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, outside the towering prosecutor's office, Dojin bypassed direct confrontation in her efforts to clear Dojin's name. Instead, she struck at the core, exposing Prosecutor Park Chojin's bribery and illegal conduct, which led to his dismissal. Through a transparent public investigation, Dojin was officially cleared of any connection to the original incident. While he couldn't entirely escape punishment for possessing an illegal awakener license, Dojin's fierce advocacy reduced the consequence to a suspended sentence. Now the two of them sat quietly in a sleek car when suddenly, the car's tablet blinked to life with an emergency broadcast. A previously unknown monster had appeared in the United Kingdom and was attacking civilians. The mantis-like creature stood approximately 1.5 meters tall and exhibited extraordinary jumping abilities. Dojin, continuing to stare out the window, cut through the tense silence, identifying it as an occasion. Dojin's eyes widened in surprise, questioning how he knew that name, which was known only to the association. Dojin's expression didn't change as he kept his gaze fixed on the passing scenery. Monster names weren't random, he thought. His thoughts drifted to the glowing red magic stone inside a cold, sterile lab. That stone held not only condensed magical energy, but also encrypted data. If decoded, it could reveal the monster's true name and the devastating knowledge tied to it. His mind flickered between two realities, one functioning under science, the other decimated by magic. Beside that crimson magic stone lurked a black inhuman monster. Monsters from that world were now appearing in this one, and Dojin already knew most of their names. Sitting with arms crossed, he calmly identified the occasions, stating that they could be easily neutralized using red blossom extract. Dojin furrowed her brow. Red blossoms. Dojin finally turned his gaze toward her, unwavering, and explained that it was harmless to humans but a potent paralytic for occasions. Spray it on them, and they wouldn't move a muscle. Dojin fell silent, absorbing the information, her expression growing serious and calculating. After a pause, she fixed him with a firm, penetrating stare, directly questioning who he was. He didn't respond. The silence between them stretched thick and heavy, filled only by the hum of the engine. His gaze returned to the window, his face unreadable. Dojin clenched her jaw and questioned if he was even listening. Suddenly, he turned his head slowly toward her, questioning what would happen if he killed Hong Hiju right now. She didn't dare say a word, unsure if he was joking or completely serious. At the association office in Akko, the sharp, repetitive sound of nail-biting filled the tense air. Hong Hiju sat behind her desk, chewing her nails non-stop, her complexion pale and her expression tight with fear and frustration. Even manager Lee, who stood nearby, was drenched in nervous sweat just watching her. Straightening his posture, he delivered his report stiffly, outlining the current situation. The nail-biting abruptly stopped. The witch remained silent for a moment before muttering darkly, wondering why Jojin was involved. Manager Lee, clutching a report in his hands, responded helplessly, stating that they weren't sure yet, they didn't know their connection or how she even knew Dojin. Hiju's expression grew even darker. With a sharp snap, she bit off another nail. Her voice was low but laced with rising fury as she wondered what the hell was happening. Suddenly, she slammed her hand on the desk, shouting in anger, questioning the nonsense about Dojin not being an awakener. She had heard he had already awakened. Faced with her outburst, Manager Lee could only rub the back of his neck, trying to stay calm, stating that all reports did indicate he awakened, but trailed off, suggesting it might be some sort of skill, something that could deceive the detection system, just a theory of course. Hiju's face twisted with rage, her eyes blazing. She jabbed her finger forward, ordering Lee to get in touch with Kang Young and offer him 20 billion or even 30 billion. She didn't care as long as he took the job. Elsewhere, a cocky voice echoed from the other side of the room, dismissing 30 billion as not enough. Kang Young lounged in his chair, a smug grin on his face. His assistant, clearly flustered, hesitated, questioning if doubling that wasn't asking a bit much. Raising a single finger, Kang Young shook his head, stating that from Hiju's perspective, he was the best option she's got. If he handled this properly, 60 billion was pocket change to her. His gaze sharpened, his voice dropping slightly, reminding his assistant that there was an S rank in Julian. If they were going up against an S rank, the fee had to reflect that. The assistant looked away uneasily, murmuring that she was no ordinary opponent. A loud stomp made the assistant jump. Kang Young leaned in, his voice low and dangerous, questioning if he thought all S ranks were the same and asserting that he could take Julian down in 20 minutes. The assistant's eyes widened in fear as cold sweat beaded on his forehead. Young's threatening demeanor instantly melted into a carefree grin, inquiring about any updates from the association. Inside the lavishly furnished office, the assistant lowered his voice cautiously, stating that the UK branch said they couldn't send any more reinforcements, and that the association had announced that hero selection for overseas deployment would now follow stricter criteria. Kang Young rubbed the back of his neck in irritation, seeing this as a way to make it impossible to back out without looking weak. Cursing under his breath, he turned back to his assistant, asking about the schedule. The assistant answered with slight hesitation that he was set to depart in 3 days. "Oh, Japan," Kang Young said, stating that he had been meaning to meet T-shirt. With both hands tucked into his pockets, he stared out the window at the vast city skyline, murmuring with quiet ambition about Macassians, a new type of monster with no known weaknesses. A satisfied smirk spread across his face as he admired the view, thinking that if he figured it out first, his value would skyrocket. A low chuckle escaped his lips. Meanwhile, in England, a blinding bolt of lightning cracked through the dark sky, slamming into the clock tower with a thunderous crash. Down below, panic erupted in the streets as civilians screamed and scattered, fleeing in every direction from the monstrous creature charging toward them, fast and relentless. Suddenly, a group of armed operatives stepped into the monster's path, ready to engage, weapons at the ready, their expressions grim as they stared up at the towering beast. The monster let out a thunderous roar, slamming its massive claws into the ground with such force that the earth split wide open. The team reacted swiftly, dodging the shockwave with precision as they fanned out, attacking from multiple angles. Below, magic users unleashed a barrage of spells, waves of glowing violet energy streaking through the air toward the creature. Then, with a single clean slash, its head was severed, sending the beast stumbling backward. Moments later, its headless body crashed to the ground with a sickening thud. Breathing heavily, the group stood in silence, eyes fixed on a mangled corpse, but the moment of relief was short-lived. One of them suddenly froze, his eyes narrowing at a distant sound. He looked up, a flash of lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the ominous clouds and revealing several more monstrous figures lurking in the shadows. A razor-sharp claw plunged from above. The man's eyes widened in horror, unable to react. And so began the night of terror in the United Kingdom. Beneath the towering clock tower, the ground was still stained with blood. In the days that followed, a relentless wave of monsters launched a coordinated assault across the city. Streets swallowed by debris and monster roars echoed through the sky. Britain's heroes fought with everything they had, but without accurate intel, they suffered tremendous losses. The enemy pressed forward, now converging on London. As the dust settled, massive silhouettes emerged from the smoke, towering creatures moving with terrifying resolve. Their golden eyes glowed, not with warmth, but with the chilling promise of death. And then, suddenly, the golden light in their eyes flickered and vanished. The monsters froze. Moments later, one after another began writhing in pain. Their bodies convulsed violently as they collapsed. Above, the thump of helicopter blades filled the air as aircraft hovered overhead. Inside, stunned soldiers and personnel stared down at the battlefield in disbelief, exclaiming that it was working. Cheers erupted as realization spread. Julian stood motionless, still processing the scene. Julian had been right. The red blossom ant extract had worked. The Macassians couldn't withstand it. Kang Young's gaze drifted toward Julian, his fists clenched at his sides, his eyes darkened with envy, unable to accept that she could be so good. Julian simply smiled, her voice calm and steady as she turned to her team. She ordered them to finish the job. Without hesitation, she drew her sword and leapt from the aircraft, diving fearlessly into the battlefield below. Later, outside the airport, a massive crowd of reporters and journalists had already gathered, eyes fixed on the entrance. The moment Julian appeared, the crowd stirred in awe, whispering that it was unbelievable. Murmurs spread among the gathered media, recognizing her as the one whose achievements at the UK headquarters spoke for themselves. She's the one who discovered the Macassians' weakness, saved the entire country, and prevented the fall of the UK. She deserved every bit of recognition. A reporter gasped, stating that she was there. Julian strode forward confidently, pulling her suitcase behind her. Kang Young followed close behind. The moment they exited the airport, a wall of flashing cameras and shouted questions hit them like a wave. Reporters shouted questions at Julian, asking how she discovered the Macassians' weakness. Despite the overwhelming media attention, Kang Young maintained his trademark charming smile as reporters shifted their focus to him, asking him to share his thoughts and acknowledging that he had captured the most Macassians during this mission. Images of Kang Young and Julian were broadcast on massive news screens throughout the city. The broadcast announced the safe return of the 200-person team, including hero Julian, stating that Korea's pride had saved the United Kingdom. Dramatic footage of the monster invasion filled the screen, highlighting the key to hunting the Macassians' red flower ant extract. Amid the busy city crowd, a lone figure watched silently, his eyes fixed on the enormous screen above a nearby skyscraper. Standing completely still, he listened intently to the broadcast. The screen shifted to Kang Young's interview, his face filling the frame. Julian's gaze sharpened, his eyes glowing coldly as he muttered Kang Young's name. The scene shifted to a lavishly decorated dining hall. Several neatly wrapped gift boxes adorned the table. A familiar voice broke the calm, questioning if it was a gift for him. Julian paused, his glass of water halfway to his lips, echoing the question in confusion. Julian smiled and gestured toward the boxes one by one, explaining that one was for his little sister and grandma and the other was for him. Sayo Julian, with a shy glance. She gently pushed a gift bag toward him, suggesting he open it at home. It wasn't really appropriate to open it there, but Julian, ignoring her suggestion, reached into the bag and pulled out a neatly folded shirt. He remarked casually that it looked expensive. Julian didn't deny it, raising her glass and replying with a composed smile, stating that it was a thank you. Thanks to him, she was recognized as a hero. Her tone shifted, becoming more serious, stating that compared to what he'd done for her, this was nothing. If he needed it, she would even buy him a car. Julian calmly placed the gift bag back on the table, stating that if he ever needed anything, he would let her know, but he had already been repaid. Julian's playful demeanor faded. Her eyes grew sharper, more determined as she looked directly at him, questioning if he would tell her if she asked how he knew the Macassians' weakness. Julian didn't flinch, questioning if he had any reason to answer that. A brief silence fell between them. Julian closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts before asking what his plans were from here on out. Her gaze narrowed. She couldn't shake the thought that it couldn't be something as innocent as world peace. If he was targeting Heju or Kang Young, that was dangerous, and she couldn't let that happen. Julian finally spoke, scratching his chin as if pondering deeply, stating that he'd probably buy a house. The unexpected answer left Julian momentarily stunned and asked incredulously if he was renting. Under a purple twilight sky, palm trees swayed along the coastline. Excited cheers and playful laughter filled the air at a luxurious beach resort. Upbeat party music mixed with flirtatious chatter, creating a vibrant atmosphere. Kang Young lounged in the pool, arms draped around two stunning women. But behind his relaxed facade, his thoughts churned. Julian was completely different now. His bloodshot eyes fluttered open, mind replaying the events in England. She figured out the monster's weakness, but clearly she was still hiding how she found that out. He muttered under his breath. A few days before, aboard a private luxury jet, Kang Young brought up Seo Dojin. Julian, still wearing her mask with an irritated expression, questioned what he meant. Kang Young stated that she took down the prosecutor just to get Dojin out and that she was there when Dojin wrecked Chulwoo. Julian replied that Chulwoo started it. He tried to kill someone inside a gate and failed. Even when they faced off later, Chulwoo struck first. Kang Young let out a cold, bitter laugh, calling that idiot blinded by pocket change and wouldn't be surprised if he got killed. Suddenly, he leaned in toward Julian, his voice dropping into something dark, stating that he was still his cousin. Kang Young muttered, his tone edged with steel, stating that he had every reason to deal with Seo Dojin himself. Julian didn't respond. She simply turned her head to the side, her expression unreadable, then looked away entirely, stating that he could do whatever he wanted, it was none of her business. Kang Young's eyes narrowed, scrutinizing her reaction, wondering what was going on, and that their relationship wasn't as solid as he thought. Without even glancing his way, Julian tossed him one last remark, stating that she had no reason to interfere. The soft sound of fine wine being poured into a crystal glass echoed in the background, but her words only deepened Kang Young's suspicion. He took a slow sip of the wine, his gaze thoughtful and dark, stating that there was definitely something between those two. The scene shifted to England, specifically Shrubbery. One of the hardest-hit locations was left in ruins after the recent wave of monster attacks. The UK Hero Association had deployed personnel to the area, their presence tight and vigilant. They were desperate to collect as many mana crystals as possible before the inevitable second wave struck. A D-rank hero sighed wearily, stating it was a waste and that if they had that red flower ant extract, even guys like them could have taken down Anicaps. The man beside him nodded grimly, stating that if the first wave had been stopped in time, this place could have been a gold mine for mana crystals, and that everyone knew that once a wave hit hidden areas and no teleportation gates could ever be installed again. One of the guards glanced uneasily at the rift, stating that they say the second wave won't just be Macassians this time, other monsters too. His teammate nodded, stating that was what was terrifying. No one knows what was coming, and he had heard some countries were completely wiped out. A faint sound behind them made the first man turn instinctively, questioning if he saw something. The man muttered, eyes still locked on the portal, stating that he just got this weird feeling like someone walked out just now. His teammate scoffed, clearly unconvinced, stating it had only been 5 hours. They both tried to shrug it off and refocus their attention, and stated that they needed to stay alert. But at that very moment, the red portal let out strange arcs of lightning dancing across its surface. The guards froze in place, eyes wide. From the portal, a man emerged, clad in black armor, a terrifying aura radiating off him like heat from a furnace. Bloodlust hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The guards stared in horror, stating that he wasn't one of them, not a hero, not even a hunter, and urged to call HQ. Before they could move, the armored figure raised his hand. A blinding ring of green light materialized in the air. It shot toward them, instantly lifting both men off the ground. Suspended helplessly, they thrashed in panic. One of them cursed, pulling out 3 daggers and hurling them, urging him to die. But the glowing rings deflected the blades with ease. The man's scarred face twisted into a cruel sneer, calling them pathetic. He clenched his fist. The guard screamed as an invisible force crushed down on them. While the figure watched coldly, he muttered that it failed. Even after activating the time-space rift, he clicked his tongue. A guard, barely conscious, forced himself to look up, stammering to question who he was. The armored man tilted his head slightly, as if considering whether to answer, but before the words could come, he flicked his wrist. The guard's body collapsed, bones shattered, blood pooling rapidly. The man calmly lowered his hand, his expression filled with disdain, stating it was time to clean up the trash. The scene changed to Pau, South Korea, a hidden residential area nestled in a lush, secluded valley surrounded by green mountains. Dojin walked leisurely across an open expanse of grass, his expression calm, his steps unhurried. But as Dojin continued walking, a strange noise made him pause. A gust of wind swept through the valley, sending the tall grass into a wild, rustling dance. Suddenly, from beneath the earth, monstrous creatures erupted, worm-like beasts with jagged saw-like teeth. One by one they burst forth, surrounding him in large numbers. Dojin crouched beside one of the gaping holes they had left behind, calmly placing his palm on the ground. He identified 6 within a 100-meter radius. An eerie, amused smile crept across his face. A blazing sphere of energy flared to life in his hand. He was curious how many of them could survive this. Without hesitation, he hurled the fireball into the hole. Silence followed. Then a violent chain of explosions erupted underground. The shock waves shook the field as mangled monster flesh was launched into the air, raining down like steaming confetti. Dojin tilted his head, eyes calmly tracking the falling remains. A smirk played on his lips. Meanwhile, in Hero Association headquarters, inside a modern high-rise office, a man sipped his coffee. His voice was cool and composed, inquiring what kind of person they were dealing with. Across the room, a man reviewed a report and confirmed his identity through official channels, stating that he used to be a rebellious young man. He once said, "He's a hero. Seo Dojin." Next to him, Min Hongyi, vice director of the Hero Association, stated that his power couldn't be measured by the hero meter. Tai Wang asked, frowning slightly, if he hadn't said that his power couldn't be measured by the hero meter. Hongyi flipped to another page in the report, stating that they never got a clear explanation. Tai Wang gave a low grunt. At the same table, a stern-faced man slammed his fist on the table with a sharp thud and called him one arrogant brat, stating that when questioned by the Hero Association, he should have answered properly. This was Park Sung-chul, vice chairman of the Hero Association. Tai Wang raised a finger, signaling for calm, stating that there was one more thing. He turned back to Min Hongyi, asking if they learned anything else. Hongyi hesitated for a moment, explaining that Dojun was trapped in Chulwu's plan. Back in Patio, Dojun was still in a fierce battle with the worm-like monsters. Dojun's predatory smile deepened. Energy was in his palms, humming softly like an unstable core ready to explode. Spectacle Man stated that Dojun was the man who had survived a near-fatal gate incident, the man who had taken brutal revenge on Chulwu, the man who had single-handedly cleared the newly formed rift in Mappo. Another beam of blazing energy tore through the last creature as it tried to retreat, blasting a hole clean through its torso. Though his methods were ruthless, bordering on excessive, one thing was clear: Sao Dojun's power was overwhelming. Back in the office, Min Hongyi lowered the report, his voice heavy, stating that Sao Dojun's strength was beyond anything they've dealt with. Tai Huang leaned back, folding his arms and closing his eyes. A wild stallion, he mused aloud. Impossible to tame but undeniably a thoroughbred. Is that what he was saying? Hongyi nodded hesitantly. There's more, he added, stating that he applied for official hero certification, saying he has a sponsor and hopes to bypass standard formalities. A sponsor from inside the association, naming Julian. The room fell into a stunned silence. Even Park Sung-chul, who had been fuming earlier, sat frozen. Tai Huang's eyes narrowed, unreadable. Back in Patio, Dojun stared at his sleek hero ID card. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, seeing his 8th-ranked hero ID in Korea. Around him the field lay decimated, worm carcasses torn, scorched, broken beyond recognition. This rift zone was cleared now. He pocketed the card and began to walk again. Elsewhere at Korean Hero Association headquarters, Chairman Tai Huang let out a booming, satisfied laugh, slapping the table hard enough to rattle the glasses. The boy gets certified and marches straight into the rifts, a nerve. Min Hongyi gave a small approving nod, stating that his decisiveness was on another level. Across from them, Park Sung-chul's face darkened with disbelief. He blinked, processing what he just heard, questioning if he went alone. No guild members, no backup, no partners, into a level 2 rift, questioning if he was insane. Tai Huang and Hongyi exchanged a quick silent glance as the vice president's voice echoed across the room. Realizing his own overreaction, Park Sung-chul let out a low cough, straightened his tie and awkwardly sat back down, but the fire in his voice hadn't gone out. Leaning forward again, his excitement resurfaced, stating that if that Sao Dojun kid came out alive, they had to announce it publicly as Korea's 8th S-rank hero. Min Hongyi remained composed, stating that they couldn't assume he wanted that and that they should ask for his consent before making it public. Park Sung-chul immediately snapped back, his voice booming again, ridiculing the idea. In times like this, with the world unstable, news that another S-rank had awakened would bring hope. He sought reinforcement from Tai Huang. Tai Huang remained silent for a beat, then slowly placed his palm on the table and rose to his feet, his gaze sharp, his voice absolute. He understood both of their perspectives, but would meet him himself face to face. Meanwhile, inside the PYU rift zone, Sao Dojun was locked in deadly combat. Dojun drove his foot hard into its midsection, the impact sending shockwaves through the beast's body and knocking it backward. But more monsters emerged from the shadows, twisting, slithering, hissing, their eyes gleaming with murderous intent. Dojun's sharp gaze flicked to the side as one of them tried to flank him. Too slow. With a snap of his wrist, his hand ignited in a swirl of crimson flame. He launched forward, a blur of motion, slicing clean through the creature with searing energy that scorched the very air. One after another, the beasts fell. Dojun fought like a storm, precise, relentless, unyielding. The serpents collapsed in a heap behind him, towering bodies thudding to the ground like felled trees. His palms still glowed faintly from the burning energy. He waved a hand to extinguish the embers that lingered around him. His eyes lifted toward the sky, endless blue, deceptively peaceful. As expected, this burns through his mana fast. The scene transitioned to the Gazan Hero Complex, where a young man was casually playing a mobile game behind the front desk. Sao Dojun entered, prompting the young man to ask for the name under the reservation. Dojun held something out, stating that he would like to see if this could be forged into a weapon. The young man scoffed, stating it was reservations only and to try another store. Dojun raised an eyebrow, stating that he had just said there were a lot of reservations and that he didn't even check the list. He added that he was the one who answered the phone earlier. The young man snapped that they were fully booked and didn't have time to waste. He urged him to go somewhere else, stating that the craftsmen in this area were all top tier. Without warning, Dojin grabbed him by the collar. The young man shouted, asking if he was insane and what he thought he was doing. He asked if he was the owner. The young man yelled back that he was his son and urged him to get his father. He came all this way because he heard this place had the best. Flustered, the young man pulled away and stepped into the back, stating that there was a customer asking for him. Moments later, Choi Cheol, the famed hero weapon craftsman, emerged from the workshop and eyed Dojin, asking who sent him there. Dojin answered, setting down his bag, stating Julian. As he began to unpack it, Choi Cheol's eyes widened in disbelief at what was inside. The son stared equally shocked and questioned what it was. Choi murmured almost in awe that it was the tip of the giant black killer fang and that it had been a long time since he had seen something like this. Dojin stated that he wanted a sleek sword and to make it as long as possible. Choi snorted, stating that he clearly didn't understand weapon crafting and that non-metallic materials like this lose durability if stretched too much. He would forge 2 medium-length blades instead. Dojin narrowed his eyes, questioning what he was admitting and if he wasn't skilled enough to connect them into a single blade. He needed the length and enhance its mana absorption to the highest level he could. The son burst out offended, questioning his lack of skill and if he was serious. His father's weapons always reached at least grade 3 in mana absorption. While examining one of their swords, Dojin remarked dryly that it felt like grade 5 before effortlessly snapping it in two. Both Choi and his son watched in stunned silence. If that was the kind of trash he was producing, he shouldn't bother. Choi, recognizing Dojin's authority, gave a solemn nod in agreement. The following day, the scene shifted to a tranquil forest, lush and bathed in morning light. Deep within, a monstrous creature slumbered, its snores rumbling through the trees. Suddenly, its eyes burst open, blazing with fury. It had been awakened. It roared, shaking the forest. Calmly, Seo Dojin stepped into view, his face hidden beneath a hood, stating that it was too noisy. Gathering energy into his hand, he unleashed a fiery blast that struck the beast with explosive force. In retaliation, the monster uprooted a massive tree and swung it like a club. Dojin nimbly evaded, soaring through the air, as he prepared his next strike. The creature reeled in surprise as Dojin dove down at incredible speed, cloaked in raw power. But in a horrifying twist, the monster instantly regenerated, stronger than before, its single red eye glowing ominously, now surrounded by a sinister green aura. Unfazed, Dojin charged in, clashing with the monstrous Cyclops in an intense battle. A devastating blow to its chest enraged the beast even more. But Dojin's strength and mastery of firepower ultimately prevailed. With a final crushing strike, he defeated the creature. As expected, it was hard to sustain the mana for long. He retrieved a jar from his bag to collect the Cyclops' blood. Later, at a bustling trade center, Dojin calmly placed the jar on the counter. The clerk's eyes widened in disbelief, questioning what it was. Dojin stated to tell his father, Choi, that with this he would be able to fuse 2 black killer fangs with ease. The clerk called out, but Dojin was already walking away, ignoring him. As he left, Dojin reflected silently that he had gathered all the essential materials, but to truly boost mana absorption, there was still one more thing he needed. To be safe, there was only one place on Earth he could get it. The scene cut to Julian, lounging at a scenic resort, seemingly enjoying a vacation. Her phone rang. It was Seo Dojin, stating only one word: Brazil. Her eyes widened in alarm, her relaxed demeanor vanishing instantly. A man walked past the poolside wearing nothing but sleek swimwear, the lazy rhythm of splashes echoing faintly in the background. Without looking at her, Julian asked whether Inju was aware of a hero being dispatched to Brazil by the association. Inju responded that she assumed so. A partnership had been formed between the Brazilian government and the association, and a full-scale operation was being launched to shut down the rift zone. Her voice remained calm as she explained that monsters in Brazil were infamous for their brutality, but defeating them yielded an absurd amount of mana stones. Because of that, and because the association was offering a solid salary, the guild had chosen to join the expedition. Inju glanced at Joyeon with a faint smirk and suggested that they should head there together and bring that man along. Joyeon's eyes narrowed slightly. It was obvious who Inju meant: the 8th S-class hero, the one everyone whispered about lately. Voices around them spilled into a chaotic tangle of teasing comments and rising emotion. Someone claimed that Joyeon must already know, pointing out there was even a rumor about the two of them having a special relationship. The accusation was met with a shrill protest as another voice insisted that W was clueless about such nonsense. A mocking voice chimed in with a sugary tone, remarking on how adorable it was, even claiming to have seen the pair sharing a cocostrian. A flustered shout followed, daring everyone else to leave if they wanted. Inju cheered, but beneath the laughter, A quieter voice admitted that whether that guy would actually join them remained uncertain. The forge flared to life again. Do-yeon examined the strange compound, fused materials that weren't even metallic, bonded seamlessly as if liquefied and compressed by unnatural force. He wondered how anyone had figured this out, perfectly combining non-metal substances, melted and fused like this, even using Cyclops blood in the process. He turned to the blacksmith, voice even and precise, and requested that the weapon be made as long as possible, around 180 centimeters, shaped for two-handed use but with a grip adjusted so he could wield it in one hand, and weighted to 5 kilograms. The blacksmith paused, arching a brow at Do-yeon's sudden polite tone. He remarked that he originally assumed Do-yeon was nothing more than a street thug, but perhaps the weapon truly held value for him. Glancing at the blueprint, he warned that 5 kilograms was no joke, and swinging it one-handed more than once wouldn't be easy. Do-yeon insisted it was fine and instructed him to proceed. He then inquired about the completion time. The craftsman answered that he would need at least a month to work the forge. Do-yeon exhaled silently, wondering whether grade 7 material could handle his full power. He then stated that he would need the real material anyway, asking the blacksmith to shape only the form for now, and enhance mana absorption once he brought the genuine ingredient. But lingering in the back of his mind was a single question: could he obtain that material in time? Days later, a luxury car pulled into view with a soft mechanical purr. Its license plate gleamed like a badge of status. Do-yeon stepped out in a dripping outfit, holding the keys as though they meant nothing, and offered them to Do-yeon as a gift. He took them without blinking, expressing his gratitude and saying he would use them well. His eyes lingered on the vehicle, wondering whether he truly seemed that insignificant. A car worth 100 million won? In hindsight, it felt about right. Do-yeon tilted her head, her tone shifting as she asked whether something was happening with the Hero Association. Do-yeon explained that they were revealing his identity, so he had forced them to pay the price. She echoed the phrase, the price, muttering that Chairman Taewang always insisted on fairness. Do-yeon opened the car door without hesitation and stated that the chairman seemed to understand, and negotiations had been settled. She sighed behind him, half exasperated, complaining that he should at least act properly and consider her position as guarantor for his employee registration. The door shut in her face. Moments later, she climbed into the passenger seat beside him. Her voice lowered as she reported that the association was in chaos. The Brazil stronghold had collapsed. Once things calmed, talks with the chairman would resume. Do-yeon repeated the word Brazil. Do-yeon nodded, confirming that they planned to shut down part of the zone entirely. Do-yeon turned slightly and asked if she intended to go. Their shoulders brushed, her cheeks flushed faintly, but she nodded. He then told her to go with him. Her eyes widened, color rushing to her face as she looked away quickly. Across the city, the mood was colder. The witch sat tensely across from Kang Young-pyo, irritation sharpening every word. She demanded to know how much more he wanted. Kang Young-pyo leaned back, utterly unfazed, telling her that it wasn't the time to get cheap. Hong Hee-ju's voice snapped with disbelief as she reminded him that he had already received 30 billion won up front, and now he was asking for even more. She accused him of never planning to do anything, lamenting that she had ever relied on someone like him. Young-pyo's smirk didn't fade. He asked who else would have accepted that request, pointing out that killers weren't exactly lining up. Hong Hee-ju shot back that plenty of men would kill without blinking as long as they were paid. Young-pyo countered that her intel was ancient and offered to give her a freebie. Leaning forward, his words landed like hammers as he revealed that Do-yeon was now S-rank, South Korea's 8th S-rank hero. Her face drained of color. She wondered aloud how Do-yeon had become S-rank, asking if it was some kind of scam. Young-pyo told her that if she didn't believe it, she could wait. The news would come out soon enough. He added that the intel hadn't been cheap, since he had paid someone for it. Her hands trembled. Do-yeon was really S-rank. Her voice broke into a full shout as she declared that if he was S-rank, she couldn't control him anymore. She slammed her hands down and promised that if money was what Young-pyo wanted, she would pay more. He simply needed to act. Young-pyo's eyes gleamed. Money was important, but a steady business relationship was worth far more. Hong Hee-ju hissed that she would do whatever it took. He just needed to make sure Do-yeon died. A notification flashed on Kang's phone. He glanced down, smiling faintly, and remarked that the heavens seemed to be watching over Director Hong. Her eyes narrowed as she asked what he meant. Kang's grin deepened as he stated that a perfect opportunity to kill Do-yeon was about to fall into their laps. The next day, aboard a plane carrying 5 S-ranks, social media buzzed about the heroes. User Jampong wrote that the Brazil operation was awesome, that someone heading to Jangxiango pushed the group to first place alone, that Park Hyo might be joining just for money, that Hyo was unbelievably sexy, that Kang Yang was probably getting a massive payout, and that no one knew who Seo Doyan was while he peacefully ate noodles. Many were curious about his abilities. The announcement declared that they would soon arrive in Brazil. The scene shifted to São Paulo, inside the Brazilian Hero Association headquarters, where tense faces gathered in the control room. News had just come in: the Korean expedition team had landed. One executive murmured that it was good news. Scanning the logs, another reported that the Koreans were the fastest among all nations to respond to their call for help. A third added that some Korean heroes had skipped lodging entirely, going straight from the plane into the rift zone, driven by their urgency-based culture. But beneath the praise, tension simmered. One executive, voice barely audible, asked what would happen if the Koreans discovered the truth. Another replied in a flat, ominous tone that there were no eternal secrets, instructing them to simply contain it until the operation ended. The first executive nodded reluctantly as silence returned, heavy and strained. Brazil's national treasure, Hero, had been defeated and killed by an unidentified being, and it wasn't a monster. The black box footage left zero doubt. The killer was humanoid. The location was near the Sanam Rift. And even now, no one knew what had really happened there. Elsewhere, inside a dimly lit room, a briefing crackled through the comms. Joyan asked where Doyan was. The answer came that he was still on the plane. Confusion sparked as Joyan pointed out that they had gotten off earlier with the group. The voice replied evenly that he had transferred, stating the destination had been far. A moment of stillness passed as Joyan asked which destination. The reply was simple: Santrum. The name dropped like iron. The comms fell silent, then erupted in disbelief. Joyan had gone to the most dangerous rift zone alone, and the mission hadn't even started. Cut to the briefing room, where the associate outlined that 2 days of local adaptation had been planned and every team would be deployed to their requested rift zone afterward. Julian exited the hotel and stepped into a cab. Just as the door was closing, Kang caught it and reminded her that deployment was scheduled only after orientation. Julian responded calmly, expressing that there was a place she intended to check out. When Kang asked where, she repeated the name Santrum, reaffirming her decision. Shock rippled through him like a blast wave as he stood silent, watching her leave. He noted that even the Brazilian Association had advised avoiding that area. Shadows stretched across the cracked earth, dry and lifeless, a suffocating silence hanging heavy in the air. The team finally arrived, only to find Dojin already there. Julian demanded an explanation, questioning why he had rushed ahead. Dojin didn't even look up. He asserted that he had waited and implied that they were the ones who had arrived late. Julian shot back, expressing that if he had informed them earlier, the frantic rush wouldn't have been necessary. She exhaled and urged him to state the real purpose of their visit. He answered with a simple declaration regarding the blue croco. A beat passed before someone hesitantly questioned whether that was truly the only reason he had traveled so far. Dojin returned the inquiry, implying he required no additional justification. Julian narrowed her eyes and reminded him that she was 3 years older. He questioned what relevance that held. She insisted that he show proper respect. He countered that he had been using polite speech, while she retorted that he kept slipping into casual speech and warned that if he wanted awkwardness, he could stick to strict formality. He began to argue but faltered halfway. Their bickering drew attention. One crew member whispered that Dojin seemed to be pushing Julian around. Another remarked on the recklessness of entering a rift without proper coordination. A third shrugged, expressing faith that Julian's presence ensured safety. Someone else acknowledged her strength but pointed out their leader was still a rookie. Yet another countered that there were levels to rookies, and if it was Dojin, he might be the most legendary rookie they'd ever seen. As they moved deeper, the air grew thicker, dense with energy, tension, and something primal. Someone hesitated before speaking up and questioned whether Sezo Dojin hadn't come to shut down the rift. Dojin replied with cold composure, stating that he had come to gather materials. He reasoned that no one discarded a mine before fully harvesting it, leaving the group uneasy as someone quietly echoed the word materials. Suddenly a claw tore through the air, razor-sharp, blindingly fast, lunging toward them. One team member shouted a warning, commanding everyone to focus and take formation. A ripple of power surged as the creature stepped into view, massive, armored, and overflowing with violent energy. Someone groaned that it looked far worse than any picture. Another muttered that the situation felt dangerously unstable. Dojin instructed them to step aside with unwavering certainty. He recalled Choi's earlier remark, reflecting that obtaining a blue croco's heart barehanded wouldn't be easy. Then he tossed his prize sword toward the team. Its weight hit the ground with unspoken purpose as he directed them to use it to gather the materials. A thunderous roar split the air, followed by the violent clash of combat. The battle erupted instantly. Dojin cleaved the monster with a single strike, the land trembling from the impact. Recognition dawned on the faces around him. One hero whispered in breathless realization that they had suspected his strength, while another gasped at the sheer force of the blow. In the aftermath, the heroes were left stunned by Dojin's overwhelming power. They whispered among themselves, marveling at how he had single-handedly defeated a blue croco and multiple monsters with a single attack. In secretive tones they added that he had slain a costrian, the dreaded monster bird, in the same effortless fashion, concluding that he was far beyond any ordinary hero. The group then turned to processing the spoils. When someone asked whether he had finished sorting the blue croco hearts, Dojin wordlessly revealed the completed bundle. Julian wondered aloud about the heart's possible uses. Julian then noticed the meat Dojin was grilling and commented that it didn't resemble beef. Dojin explained that it was blue croco meat, assuring them it was edible, and even offered her a portion. She questioned the need to eat monster meat when normal food was available. Dojin replied that she didn't have to eat it if she didn't want to, then continued eating quietly. Inju asked whether it was truly edible. Their shock turned to disbelief when Julian, trusting Dojin's judgment, decided to taste it. After trying it, she found it surprisingly good. That single act of trust immediately shifted the group's attention from the monster meat to Dojin's dynamic with Julian. Inju leaned in and pressed him for his secret, specifically questioning how he had managed to win over someone who had never dated and was known for resisting men easily. The group demanded to know what sort of romantic strategy had earned enough trust for her to eat something so unusual. The question caused Dojin to briefly reminisce about his past life at the Imperial Academy before he turned 20 and the noble ladies he had known, Lady Maysil of the Grain Count family, and later, in his mid-20s, the young lady of the Leshley family, Luenda Leshley. He also recalled a final place of rest in a ruined world and a single name, Veronica. His train of thought was abruptly cut short when Inju demanded an answer. He replied cryptically, stating that honey does not seek out the bee, which was met with groans, and immediately declared the cheesiest line they had ever heard, prompting Julian to cough in reaction. Meanwhile, back in Sao Paulo, an assistant delivered a report to Kang, who was already frustrated that the operation had not begun, wondering aloud if the team had rushed out only for free food. Kang questioned why Dojin and Julian, along with her clam guild, were together with Dojin and why they were moving towards Santarem. They speculated whether there were any valuable monsters in that region, noting that all they had ever heard from Brazilian authorities was that the area was extremely dangerous. Once again, Kang lamented that anything involving Dojin was always unpredictable. Kang then received a call from Director Hong. She demanded confirmation of whether Dojin was still alive and questioned when he would actually do his job. Kang asked why she was pushing the issue again and whether something had happened. She revealed that his father, the chairman, had most likely seen the news of Dojin's S-rank status and had ordered that he be brought back immediately. Kang observed that even the chairman of the T-group was now stepping in, noting the irony with thinly veiled sarcasm and asking if that was why Director Hong was so agitated. Hong Heju warned Kang not to joke, stressing the gravity of the situation. Kang replied that he had finally found a suitable partner and would make sure things did not end poorly, his gaze lingering on a map of Brazil. In a subsequent call, a cold voice stated with certainty that Seo Dojin would never return from Brazil, a plan they seemed quite pleased with. Director Hong Heju ordered Kang to end the call, and Kang immediately instructed his assistant to contact Takashi's side, which was promptly acknowledged. The conspirators were satisfied that Dojin had wandered into a remote region, making their task far easier. The scene then returned to Dojin's group as they advanced into a lush green forest. Julian warned him that they were entering a jungle notorious for dangerous monsters. When asked what kind, she identified them as lynx. Dojin calmly confirmed that the creatures were indeed present. When questioned on how he knew, he simply stated that of course he did. Anticipating danger, Julian distributed earplugs to everyone, explaining that the lynx's cry could paralyze the mind and that the Brazil Hero Association had issued warnings that they must be handled with extreme caution. The group found it strange that Dojin, despite claiming knowledge of the monsters, refused the protective earplugs. Ignoring the warnings, Dojin stepped forward without hesitation and the others followed behind him. They soon arrived within the lynx's territory. The sight before them left them frozen, mouths hanging open in shock. Someone shouted in panic for everyone to cover their ears. Yet Dojin remained perfectly composed, his eyes locked onto the lynx as he prepared to face it alone in the night. The moon hung high, silver light spilling across the battlefield as the lynx raised its head and unleashed a bone-chilling howl. The sound tore through the darkness like a blade, forcing the team to clutch their ears as they struggled against the disorienting echo. Dojin alone stood unmoved, his gaze unwavering as he studied the beast without flinching. Julian watched him with wide eyes, confusion churning within her. She could not understand why he made no effort to shield himself from the sound. Before the thought could settle, Dojin moved, picking up a stone as flames gathered around it at his command. He hurled it with flawless precision, the fiery strike landing true and forcing the lynx to recoil before vanishing into the shadows. But Dojin pursued it without pause. His footsteps carried him deeper into hostile territory, the others following soon after, their breathing uneven with awe and disbelief. Inju, still shaken, struggled to process what she had witnessed, while Julian realized with a jolt that the lynx's howl had completely ceased. When they finally caught up to him, the sight awaiting them sent a chill through their blood. More lynx emerged from the darkness, their massive forms slipping between the trees, crimson eyes burning as faint runes glowed across their fur. The largest among them stepped forward, its killing intent unmistakable, fangs bared. Julian's body stiffened as something deep within her stirred, unnatural and terrifying, as if the beast's presence had awakened an echo she could not control. Her vision blurred and her pupils flared, shifting into the same sinister red glow as the monsters before her. In an instant, Dojun moved to her side, placing his hand over her eyes, his voice firm as he warned her and the others about the danger. He explained that it was not the howl that paralyzed the mind, but the lynx's gaze itself. He urged everyone to close their eyes and trust him completely. Stepping forward, his blade shimmered as fire wrapped around its edge, flames coiled at his command, orbiting his body like blazing stars. His thoughts flickered with doubt, questioning whether this was the true extent of his power. Yet he pressed onward resolute, invoking the sacred form of his technique. Vendian sword skill first form Corinda Milagro Ruckle, his eyes ignited, burning like living fire as the aura condensed into a single brilliant point. With a sweeping motion of his blade, he unleashed the storm itself. The fireball streaked toward the lynx pack, detonating upon impact and flooding the field with searing heat. The world erupted. Flames devoured trees and soil, ripping the night apart with a roar that swallowed everything. The ground trembled violently, sparks rained down, and the forest was carved open by an inferno, leaving behind a massive trench filled with molten embers. Her chest heaved as she lifted her head, eyes widening in disbelief at the sight before her. The devastation was beyond comprehension. A single strike had reduced the land to ruin. Amid the chaos, one lynx collapsed lifeless, its body charred beyond recognition. The survivors trembled, their strength shattered, eyes dulled by fear. Dojun advanced with steady steps, his blade gleaming coldly. The beasts attempted to ensnare his mind with their gaze, but he cut one down without hesitation, his strike swift and merciless. He deemed it pathetic as the head fell lifelessly. Those eyes would no longer haunt the living. He claimed the eyes, stating with cold resolve that he had use for them. Dojun strode forward, his presence commanding absolute attention from everyone around him. His eyes were cold, unwavering, and behind him followed a group. Their expressions showed no fear, only quiet confidence, while Jujun kept her gaze fixed on his unyielding form. Other heroes whispered in awe, calling what they witnessed in humans something far beyond the limits of mankind. The group continued forward without hesitation, and in the rear some quietly wondered whether this man could be stronger than Shabriel Fons, the famed hero whose feats had long defined power. Another murmured that his strength might rival Cain Lester, the world's strongest hero, though others scoffed, claiming such comparisons were absurd. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath until figures emerged from the shadows. Corpses stumbling and crawling forward, skeletal frames wrapped in rotting flesh, eyes glowing red with hunger. To them, the lone man appeared to be clueless prey wandering into their domain. Someone among the heroes muttered that the undead clearly did not understand the situation, since creatures without brains could hardly grasp it. As one creature lunged forward, fangs bared, Dojun's fist shot out with ruthless precision, shattering the monster's skull on impact. His golden eyes gleamed as he moved with lethal grace, unfaltering. More rushed him, claws tearing through the air, but his strikes were faster. One clean punch caved in another. A brutal kick smashed a third into the earth, and one by one they fell. Soon the forest floor was littered with shattered remains. The group behind him stood frozen, wide-eyed in shock at the massacre. Slowly they began to advance as well. From the rear, Jujun's curious voice rose, wondering aloud about the swordsmanship she had witnessed. Dojun turned slightly at her words, and Jujun followed up, asking where he had learned such a technique, one that left red sparks trailing with every swing. Dojun responded only by asking whether Jujun wished to learn it herself. Her face immediately brightened as she eagerly confirmed that she did. But Dojun's reply was cold and grounded, stating that in such a peaceful world she would never need it, and even if she learned it there would be no time when she would ever use it. Jujun stiffened at his words. Inwardly she felt there was a limit to being dismissed like this. She reminded herself that she was an S-rank hero as well. Out loud she insisted she would use it at least once before she died, accusing him of simply not wanting to teach her. Upset, she turned away, cheeks burning, muttering that she finally understood what he truly thought of her. Injun could hardly believe what she had just witnessed. With a weary sigh, she called for everyone to leave the rift, and the group nodded in agreement. As they made their way out, she reflected in silence. Thanks to Dojin, they had cleared it without a single casualty. When they returned next time to close it completely, the time required would be far shorter, but But just as she stepped through, a voice struck her ears. It was low, venomous, and spoken in Japanese. Someone spat that they would kill Dojin, cursing him for daring to get in their way. Inju froze, recognizing the voice instantly. At the same moment, Dojin pulled Julian close, causing her cheeks to flush red from the sudden contact. From the opposite side of the clearing, a group of men appeared. At their head stood Ryoma Takashi, an ex-Yakuza S-rank hero and guildmaster of Tegoku. Takashi's expression twisted with irritation as he growled that today had been his chance to finally enjoy himself with Julian and that Dojin had ruined it. He ordered Dojin to step aside before he smashed his face and swearing that he would kill him. Dojin casually remarked that it seemed Takashi's own companions did not care much for him. Julian glanced at him in surprise, asking if he understood Japanese, and he replied that he knew enough while thinking inwardly that it had been the real Dojin who had studied it. Takashi blinked in confusion, unable to understand him, before one of his subordinates shouted in outrage. The man demanded that Dojin bow his head and apologize immediately for insulting their master, asking if he even knew who he was addressing. Dojin responded curtly and dismissively, stating that he was not interested and that they should leave. Inju's eyes widened in alarm as she thought about the fact that this was the Tegoku Guild, one of the top 5 guilds in Japan, and that their master was an ex-Yakuza infamous for his temper. Even for Dojin, escalating this could be dangerous. She hurriedly tried to calm the situation, urging both sides to stand down. Takashi snarled that this was no place for a woman like her to interfere. At that word, her guildmates flared with fury, shouting back in outrage and hurling insults while his men responded with equal anger. Inju silenced them sharply and introduced herself as Inju of Korea's Violet Magnolia Guild, stating that it would be best to resolve this peacefully. Takashi sneered, saying he had never heard of her guild, and mocked her further, suggesting that she needed a man as well. Reaching out, he attempted to seize Julian by the arm. Before he could, Dojin blocked him. Takashi snarled, ordering him to step aside as he swung a fist toward Dojin's face, adding that he also had business with him and that he would kill him later. Dojin's gaze sharpened as he realized the entire exchange had been nothing more than provocation. Very well, he thought he would accept the challenge. In the next instant, his fist landed with crushing force, sending Takashi flying backward and crashing into the ground. His men froze in shock, eyes wide. Even then, Takashi remained calm as he told his allies to step back, claiming that Dojin had thrown the first punch and that what followed would be self-defense. Dojin surged forward with a furious snarl, eager for battle, and Takashi declared it a one-on-one fight, ordering his subordinates to stay out of it. His aura surged and his eyes glowed red as he prepared to strike. From the sidelines, Julian's heart raced as she prayed silently that Dojin would show restraint and only half kill this man. A tense silence filled the clearing as the two sides faced each other. The sound of footsteps broke the stillness, drawing every eye to Dojin. As he stepped forward, he did so without hesitation. His foot crashed down, pinning Takashi to the ground with force that cracked the earth beneath him. Takashi cried out, but the sound was smothered by the crushing weight. In the next moment, Dojin hurled him aside. Takashi tumbled across the dirt until he finally stopped, broken and gasping. Takashi's group stood frozen, unable to believe what they had witnessed. Takashi himself could hardly think straight. Nothing he had been told about Dojin matched the figure before him now. The pressure radiating from him made it hard to breathe, and his chest tightened as the realization struck that he might die here. Desperation forced him to move, and he attempted to flee, but Dojin was already standing in front of him. Dojin stated that someone had put him up to this, and that he already had a good idea who it was. Takashi broke down, begging for his life. Dojin remarked coldly that Takashi was already begging. Before Takashi could react, Dojin's hand shot forward, seizing him by the hair. His fist tightened, and in the next instant the punch landed. The blow sent Takashi flying once again, his body crashing hard before skidding across the ground. Inju noted that the fight was even more one-sided than she had expected. Dojin pressed his foot against Takashi's head, holding him down. Inju gripped Julian's arm, urging her to say something before Dojin killed him. Julian shouted for him to stop, stating that if he continued, Takashi would die. Dojin answered that he would take responsibility. Inju grabbed his arm, demanding how he could claim such a thing, telling him that he should not do something that required responsibility in the first place.
Oh man, you're just ruining it.
Dojin replied that he had seen enough scum like Takashi and that it was better to kill such people outright. Both women clung to him tightly. Inju pleaded that he should not drag himself down because of trash like him. Julian insisted that they had already learned their lesson. Inju then turned to Takashi's men, warning them that if they did not want to end up like Takashi, they should never try this again. They quickly agreed, but Dojin cut in, stating that it was not enough. He ordered them to kneel and press their heads to the ground. They obeyed immediately. Dojin reminded them that the Yakuza cut off their own fingers when they made mistakes. One of the men begged for forgiveness. Dojin instructed them to say that they were trash and that they were sorry, and then he would let them go. One by one they complied. Inju stood frozen wide-eyed while some of the others smirked at the sight. Takashi lay broken on the ground as his men groveled. Only then did Dojin allow them to leave. The scene shifted back to the city as sunlight spilled over the skyline of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Inside an office, a high-ranking Brazilian authority sat holding reports, his frown deepening as he read, the weight of the information settling heavily on him. Across from him, Julian and Inju waited quietly. The man muttered in disbelief, wondering if he was really expected to believe what he was reading. An S-rank hero like Takashi had been beaten until he was crippled, all by a single man, with Takashi standing as the only casualty. He admitted that the facts could not be denied, yet it was still difficult to accept. He stated that Brazil had hoped Korea and Japan would work together on the San Rift, but if the report was accurate, their association had no reason to interfere. The case, he decided, would be handed over to the Korean and Japanese associations. Inju responded with a simple affirmation. The man then asked if they had noticed anything unusual at the Santorum Rift itself. Inju answered that there had been nothing out of the ordinary. He nodded slowly before questioning why Dujan's name appeared more frequently in the report than anyone else's, despite the fact that he had not appeared in person. Julian explained that Dujan had said he needed to finish wrapping things up elsewhere. At the hospital, Takashi slowly stirred awake. His body ached beneath layers of heavy bandages, and even breathing sent pain through him. When his eyes finally opened, he saw Dujan standing beside the bed holding a bouquet of flowers. Fear flashed across Takashi's face before he could suppress it. Dujan told him to remain still, speaking calmly, as though this were nothing more than a routine hospital visit. Yet his words carried weight, and what followed proved it. In his hand, Dujan revealed the lynx eye, its faint glow shimmering softly. Takashi's body went rigid as the light caught his gaze. His breath hitched, and his resistance crumbled. Dujan leaned closer, commanding him to speak, ordering him to explain what had happened this time. The glow filled Takashi's vision, his pupils widening as his voice broke, words spilling out without resistance. He confessed that because of someone like him, weak and worthless, he had caused trouble for the Korean guilds, the weight of the confession filling the sterile room. Wrapped in bandages, he looked less like a warrior and more like a shattered man. Dujan's expression remained unreadable as he listened to Takashi muttering that the Yakuza were trash, his words trembling between defeat and resentment. Without responding, Dujan turned away, his steps calm and measured as he left the room. Takashi's broken words lingered behind him, echoing through the empty silence. The scene shifted as rumors of the clash between the Korean and Japanese hunters spread rapidly. News outlets filled their pages with stories, reports of Takashi's defeat, speculation over what had truly happened, and headlines questioning whether the mysterious Dujan had finally revealed his true strength. Images of Takashi, heavily bandaged and battered, circulated alongside blurry photographs of Dujan, adding fuel to the growing storm. Back at the offices of the Korean Hero Association, the chairman, Awang, remarked that Dujan's name was everywhere, sweeping through domestic news like a storm. The coverage was explosive, with stories about the Korean hero Dujan appearing every single day. His colleague then asked whether it was true that the Japanese Hero Association had already abandoned the investigation. Nate Wang replied in confirmation, stating that it certainly appeared that way. Takashi himself, he added, had admitted it, calling it an undeniable reality. As they continued their discussion over coffee, the colleague admitted his confusion. Takashi had always been the type to scheme, constantly plotting something. For him to give up so easily made no sense at all. Nate Wang then suggested that it only meant there was something even Japan wanted to avoid. Curious, his colleague asked what he meant by that. The answer came with a shake of the head. Nate Wang admitted he didn't know, but soon enough, everyone would. His gaze hardened as he warned that when the truth came to light, the balance of the world's heroes would shift. The night passed quietly, and the countdown to the operation entered its final stretch. Only one day remained before the attempt to close the Brazilian rift zone. The Korean heroes who had arrived early were already well adjusted to the area, mingling naturally with heroes from other countries who continued to gather in the city. Training facilities echoed with the sound of clashing weights and steady drills as individuals pushed themselves toward peak condition. Elsewhere, groups gathered in lounges and meeting rooms, discussing strategies, dividing responsibilities, and confirming the finer details of the joint operation. Everyone prepared in their own way, the looming battle drawing closer with every passing hour. On the eve of the operation, a pre-battle party was arranged to lift spirits and encourage success. The hall was bright with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Yet before long, all attention converged on a single figure. The star of the night was undoubtedly Co. Dujan. His entrance drew eyes from every corner of the room, whispers trailing in his wake. Heroes from different nations stepped forward, openly expressing their curiosity. At the party, Inju whispered that rumors of Dujan's fight with Takashi had already spread far beyond Korea and Japan, now circling the globe. Each version painted Dujan as the man who had beaten an S-rank hero into the ground. Everyone who approached seemed interested only in discussing Dujan and his clash with Takashi. She pointed out that Dujan never once boasted about it, which made the attention all the more impressive. To her, it was amazing. Still, she admitted quietly that compared to him, both she and Dujan seemed ordinary. Dujan remained silent, her gaze fixed elsewhere, her expression stiff. Inju frowned at being ignored, complaining that her friend wasn't even listening. She asked what Dujan had seen that made her face so rigid. The celebration continued around them, a sea of faces mingling beneath glittering lights. Dujan moved quietly through the crowd, drawing attention wherever he passed. Among the gathering was Gloria Tyler, America's S-rank hero and the one ranked first in the global most beautiful hero poll. Her arrival effortlessly stole the spotlight, her presence as dazzling as her reputation. From the sidelines, Inju and Jujan watched. Inju pinched Jujan and commented loudly that it was the sort of thing bound to sour anyone's mood. She urged Jujan to stand up and do something instead of just sitting there, her tone playful yet insistent. Jujan, caught off guard, stammered in surprise. Meanwhile, Dujan's gaze lingered briefly in their direction, his expression as unreadable as ever. Jujan finally gathered her courage and stepped forward through the crowd. Her movements were slightly stiff but determined, her eyes lowered, cheeks flushed red. Though her heart raced, she forced herself onward. Gloria, finishing her conversation, offered a graceful smile and a light farewell, saying it had been enjoyable and that she hoped to see Castle again. She moved on without lingering. Jujan blinked at the name, caught off guard, and quietly asked who Castle was. Dujan, sipping his wine, answered without hesitation, stating that it referred to him. Jujan looked surprised upon learning that Dujan had once used an English name. She asked about it with curiosity, and he explained calmly that it was simply a name he had gone by before adopting the one he used now. She studied his downcast expression, curiosity flickering in her eyes. A question quietly surfaced in her mind. Could it be that he had lived abroad when he was younger? The idea, however, made little sense. There had been no mention of such a detail in the investigation reports, leaving her puzzled. Why had he never mentioned it to her? Across the room, a man observed their interaction in silence. Kang, holding a glass of red wine, watched Dojin with barely concealed disgust. Cursing Takeshi internally, he bitterly reflected that the man could not even handle something as insignificant as that. Taking a slow sip, his thoughts shifted toward calculation and intent, deciding that he would have to intervene personally. His gaze sharpened. At that moment, fragments of Juin's voice drifted through the crowd. She was urging Dojin to remain cautious. Kang subtly turned his head, his eyes narrowing as the two passed by him. Behind him, Juin continued in a softer tone, expressing concern despite acknowledging Dojin's strength, warning that not all enemies fought fairly and that Takeshi still had close allies. Dojin abruptly cut her off, signaling that she had said enough. Juin pressed on, questioning whether he should at least know who those people were. Dojin let out a low, mocking chuckle, dismissing them as cowards hiding behind reputation, and assured her that they posed no threat to him whatsoever. As he spoke, Dojin slowly turned his head, his gaze locking onto the man standing behind him. A sharp, humorless smile formed on his lips. Kang froze under the weight of that stare, gripping his wine glass tightly. Fury twisted his expression as he glared back, while Dojin maintained his calm, taunting smile. Kang's fingers trembled as his grip tightened, his thoughts seething with murderous intent. The scene shifted. A bright moon hung against the darkened sky. At the rift site near Centurem, Inju and her team stared in awe at the phenomenon before them. She looked upward, expressing quiet amazement, noting that it was the first time she had ever witnessed something like this. Crackling arcs of blackish-violet lightning danced across the rift's surface, prompting her to remark on its murky, pitch-black appearance. Juin, brimming with excitement, stepped closer to the edge and light-heartedly dismissed the concern, reminding Inju that they had two S-rankers present and suggesting they proceed with sealing it immediately. Inju released a soft breath, her voice steadying as she agreed, before issuing a firm command for everyone to move in. The team responded in unison, acknowledging her order. Within the eerie gloom of the rift zone, the group advanced cautiously. Juin glanced at Dojin, noticing the deep furrow in his brows and the grim silence he maintained. Concern tightened her chest, prompting her to ask what was wrong. Dojin hesitated, then questioned whether she could feel it. Confused, she asked what he meant, then turned to Inju, seeking confirmation. Inju expressed confusion, stating that she sensed nothing unusual. Dojin offered no immediate reply. Instead, he stared into the rift, the flickering purple lightning reflected in his dark eyes. His lips pressed into a thin line, After several seconds, his cold voice broke the silence, explaining that the mana concentration had suddenly spiked. His tone grew heavier as he remarked that the atmosphere felt disturbingly familiar, as if something was repeating itself. High atop a jagged rock, a man monitored a device measuring mana levels. Watching the numbers climb, he muttered about the increase surpassing 23%, predicting it would soon reach 30. Sneering, he expressed that it would be a blessing if everyone inside perished. Moments later, Inju's teammates began to groan, their bodies trembling uncontrollably as they struggled under the crushing pressure. Dojin scanned the surroundings, his expression darkening as he noted that the mana density was far thicker than even the Pardashua forest. Seeing this rare unease on his face, Julian's heart tightened. It was the first time she had ever seen Dojin like this, and she sensed that something dreadful lay ahead. Breaking the tension, Inju ordered everyone to remain calm, explaining that the heaviness might be a unique characteristic of the Rift Zone and warning them not to lower their guard. She assigned roles clearly, instructing Julian to protect the formation while addressing Dojin next. Julian acknowledged the plan, confirming their focus until the cause of the fluctuation was identified. Inju reinforced their primary objective, sealing the rift, and ordered them to move out. Once again, the team responded in unison, advancing into the pitch-black night. The map displayed the Centurem Rift Zone deep within northern Brazil. Manaus, the region's largest city, had become the central operations hub for both Korean and Brazilian hero teams. Then, an explosion tore through the darkness. Several members were hurled violently to the ground. A sharp, rhythmic fluttering filled the air as massive winged shapes descended. Giant hornet-like monsters swooped down, diving straight toward the team. Hyan W's face contorted with fury as he witnessed his comrades being grievously injured. One collapsed right before him. Alarm flashed in his eyes, and before he could react, another hornet lunged at him. He threw a full-powered punch, the impact sending smoke spiraling around his arm. Through clenched teeth, he identified them as flying-type assassin beasts, wasp variants. The swarm only intensified, plunging the battlefield into chaos. Suddenly, a massive axe crashed down toward Inju's squad. A trembling voice shouted in disbelief, questioning why the orc demons were so overwhelmingly strong. Dark figures emerged, orc-like creatures with long fangs and gleaming axes, snarling as they advanced. Hyan Wu and B charged from behind in a coordinated counterattack. B landed a heavy strike, but horror set in when it barely left a mark. The monster raised its weapon, poised to strike him down. In an instant, Julian appeared, darting through the air. She grabbed them both and pulled them clear of danger. One of them expressed breathless gratitude, while Julian coldly warned them not to act recklessly again before turning back toward the battlefield. Before her stood a massive orc beast, towering several times her size. It roared and swung its weapon. Julian twisted aside at the last moment, countering with a spinning kick to its head. The creature staggered, snarled, and retaliated. Julian channeled mana into her legs, leaping high as energy flared beneath her boots. Her next kick landed with devastating force, sending a shockwave rippling through the orc's massive body. Another monster spotted an opening and charged forward. Its axe raised high, but the strike went wide. Instead, the blade buried itself deep into its own comrade's skull. The creature froze in stunned confusion, and in that brief instant, Julian appeared behind it like a phantom. A swift, perfectly timed kick sent both the monster and its weapon flying, and the massive body crashed into the ground with a deafening thud. The surrounding heroes stood frozen in disbelief, utterly overwhelmed by her display of power. One of them murmured in awe, acknowledging that Dojin's strength usually overshadowed everyone else. Another orc roared in blind fury, but before it could even take a step, Dojin's fist smashed into its face. The impact crushed bone instantly, dropping the creature lifeless to the ground. Inju surveyed the battlefield with growing unease. Assessing the threat level, she reflected that for such difficulty to appear right at the entrance, even with both S-rankers present, sealing the rift would not be simple. Blood pooled thickly across the ground, staining the soil beneath the fallen monsters. Julian approached Dojin and questioned what had caught his attention. He kept his eyes fixed on the corpses, drawing her focus to faint black ripples drifting through the air. She repeated the term uncertainly, finally noticing dark, wave-like currents of energy coiling around the remains, so subtle they were nearly impossible to detect without intense focus. She quietly asked what it was. Dojin's eyes narrowed sharply as he explained that the monster's sudden surge in strength came from those waves of dark mana, questioning why such energy existed there at all. Silence fell over the group like a suffocating weight. No one moved. The air grew unnaturally heavy, as if the world itself were holding its breath before something dreadful awakened. Then, from deep within the forest, bone-chilling sounds echoed through the night. A massive mud creature burst from the dense jungle, roaring with feral rage. A brown-haired young man leapt forward, his sword slicing cleanly through the monster's mud-formed torso. Yet almost instantly, the creature reformed. its body pulling itself back together as though untouched. It then collapsed into a violent wave, surging toward him. Reacting in perfect sync, the youth and a nearby shield-bearer launched a coordinated counterattack. The young man slashed repeatedly, his blade cutting through the air with sharp whistling sounds, but the moment they paused, the creature regenerated again, completely unharmed. The shield-bearer muttered in disbelief, unable to accept what he was seeing. The brown-haired youth voiced his shock, recognizing just how unnaturally powerful the creature was. Before either could recover, the mud monster struck, its tendrils slamming into them with explosive force. The youth staggered backward, planting his sword into the ground to keep from falling, while the shield-bearer was flung violently across the terrain. Looking down at his damaged uniform, he trembled as he realized the blow had torn straight through his combat gear, acknowledging how dire the situation had become. Nearby, other teammates were being overwhelmed by yet another monster. One of them cried out in panic, demanding to know what was happening. At that moment, another mud beast crept up behind the brown-haired youth, its massive jaws opening wide to devour him whole. Just before it could strike, Inju burst into motion, her sword flashing as she severed the creature's head in a single clean cut. Meanwhile, the first mud beast expanded its body, preparing to crush both men beneath its enormous mass. Once again, Inju intervened, carving through the creature with brutal precision, saving them at the last second. Glancing back with a grim expression, she voiced her realization that if the swamp demons were already this powerful, then Velkara would be far worse. Concluding that something was fundamentally wrong with this rift, suddenly a realization struck her, and her eyes widened in dread. A terrifying possibility formed in her mind. As more grotesque pulsating shapes crawled out of the mud, her heart pounded violently. She feared that this was not limited to Brazil, realizing it could be happening across the entire world. Elsewhere, near the Manaus Rift, mist drifted gently across the mountains, creating a deceptively peaceful scene. Deep within the forest, however, a man ran desperately for his life, gasping between ragged breaths. His face was slick with sweat, terror etched into his wide eyes, as he revealed that everyone had been wiped out, even Arvado from Brazil. Behind him, the lingering memory of a monstrous spider-like creature haunted every step he took. He recalled the fate of David from France, acknowledging that he too had perished, all because of the Velkara. At that same moment on Dojin's side, Julian turned toward him, clearly distracted by what she had just overheard. She repeated the name Velkara aloud, testing its weight. Dojin drove his fist straight through the body of another mud beast, killing it instantly. As the remains collapsed lifelessly to the ground, he glanced at Julian and confirmed that Velkara had also been corrupted by dark mana, warning that they would need to remain cautious. Julian furrowed her brow in thought, reasoning aloud that dark mana must be the same black aura surrounding the dark orcs earlier. Turning toward the swamp monsters ahead, she narrowed her eyes at the faint black currents swirling around their bodies, realizing that the same force was wrapping around them now and amplifying their strength. Dojin calmly affirmed her conclusion. She barely had time to process it. Another monster lunged toward her, forcing Julian to flip backward before surging forward, her strike shattering straight through its chest. Her teammates froze in wide-eyed disbelief, stunned by the sheer force behind her attack. Dojin, however, did not spare them a glance. He continued his explanation in a steady, analytical tone, likening the phenomenon to concentrated mana being force-fed into the monsters' bodies. While still fighting, Julian questioned the idea mid-strike, comparing mana to the magic systems found in video games. Dojin could not suppress a brief laugh. Hearing it, Julian flushed deeply, her frustration rising as she demanded to know what was so amusing, pressing him on whether mana truly existed in this world. Dojin listened without interrupting, then delivered a blunt truth, explaining that the greatest distinction between heroes and ordinary people was mana itself. Ahead of them, a monster roared loudly, announcing its presence. The instant the sound rang out, Dojin moved like lightning, slicing cleanly through it, and another beast beside it. He did not smile or boast. Instead, he stood still, lost in quiet contemplation. For a brief moment, Dojin imagined a world without mana, his expression calm and distant. Such a world would be peaceful, he mused. That calm did not last. 3 more monsters lunged at him simultaneously. Dojin's expression hardened, his movements efficient and merciless. This would end quickly. One fist crushed a creature outright, his other hand pierced straight through another, while the monster beneath his feet was obliterated under his weight. Dojin then leapt clear of the circle, and all 3 beasts exploded into pieces behind him. His teammates stared in stunned admiration, utterly speechless. Julian stepped forward, clearly puzzled, questioning whether mana, especially dark mana, was the true source of the monster's overwhelming strength. Dojin met her gaze and clarified, comparing it to an athlete injected with an extreme dose of performance-enhancing substances. Understanding dawned on Julian, her eyes widening as she voiced her realization, before immediately questioning how Dojin even knew such details. Dojin gave her an odd look, remarking that she was the one who should have known, and that her ignorance of it was what truly seemed strange. After the battle, the group followed Dojin's map toward the Valkara lair, a treacherous route winding through demon-infested swampland. Adhering strictly to his instructions, they slowed their pace, fully aware that this region was especially dangerous. Eventually, they reached their destination. Inju moved ahead first, and upon seeing what lay before them, she raised a hand signaling everyone to stop. Dozens of white cocoons were wrapped tightly around various monsters, suspended unnaturally in front of her. Turning back, she issued a careful warning, identifying them just as Dojin had described as Valkara feeding cocoons. Spider silk and pale casings covered the trees and undergrowth, blanketing the area. Inju scanned their surroundings with a commander's vigilance, cautioning everyone to remain alert, as Valkara could be nearby. Suddenly, Dojin contradicted her, immediately drawing everyone's attention. He denied her assumption outright, lifting his hand as power gathered in his palm, aiming it toward a cluster of cocoons. He declared that this was the true danger, noting that it was fortunate they had discovered it early. Seeing the fireball forming in his hand, Inju reacted in visible shock, questioning whether Dojin was a mage, before staring at the cocoons in disbelief, and asking if those were truly the most dangerous threat. Dojin offered no verbal response, he simply flicked his hand, launching the fireball. Each cocoon detonated instantly upon impact, erupting into flames. As the blaze engulfed the cocoons, Dojin explained that Valkara had absorbed dark mana, meaning they would no longer control their spawn like puppets. If left alone, the group would be surrounded and slaughtered. Turning to the others, he stated plainly that their next objective was to capture the Valkara. The force of the explosion ripped through the air, triggering a chain reaction as nearby cocoons burst apart one after another. No one spoke. The group stood frozen in stunned silence. Inju watched Dojin closely, deep in thought. Despite this being their first encounter with such a situation, Dojin handled it with absolute certainty, as though he already knew exactly how everything would unfold. Julian stepped closer and rested a hand on Dojin's shoulder, bluntly questioning whether he had been reborn, or if this was somehow his second life. Dojin murmured thoughtfully, acknowledging that such an interpretation was not entirely wrong. Turning toward Inju, he asked how much farther the rift entrance was. Inju answered steadily, explaining that once they passed through the forest, they would be halfway there. Dojin frowned at the word halfway, irritation flickering across his face. After a brief silence, he made a decision that stunned everyone present, declaring with firm resolve that the rift would be sealed that very day. Inju blinked, uncertainty crossing her expression as she pointed out that while Dojin might be capable of such a feat, the rest of the team was not. Dojin swept his gaze across the group, taking in their exhaustion and lingering unease, then released a quiet breath. He instructed them to rest, calmly stating that he would deal with the Valkara himself and return shortly. Before anyone could react, Dojin shot forward like a bolt of lightning. Within seconds, his figure vanished from sight, leaving the group frozen in stunned silence. Sung-ho struggled to comprehend what he had witnessed, barely managing to process how someone could move that fast. Inju shared his disbelief, quietly acknowledging that Dojin still had an incredible amount of strength left. Meanwhile, Dojin tore through the forest, his eyes constantly scanning the terrain for any sign of movement. Eventually, he found what he was searching for, a spider calmly weaving its web. He murmured softly as he charged forward, sword raised. The creature sensed danger and let out a sharp screech, its body swelling grotesquely as it transformed into a massive spider. From its abdomen, dozens of sticky threads erupted, whipping violently through the air. Dojin reacted without hesitation, slipping between the attacks with flawless precision. Landing firmly, he twisted his wrist and unleashed a blazing slash. Steel flashed. The giant spider was torn apart, its body splitting into bloody fragments before crashing to the ground, twitching weakly. Dojin exhaled slowly, his breathing heavy yet controlled. He briefly wondered if his monocont control technique was responsible, allowing him to absorb traces of dark energy and extend his endurance far beyond normal limits. Sometime later, Dojin returned to the campsite. Dojin stared at him in disbelief and asked Inju if he had really taken down a Valkara alone in such a short time, finding it almost impossible to believe. Inju admitted she felt the same, noting that Dojin did not even appear fatigued. Dojin calmly reported that no monsters remained in the area, instructing everyone to rest and regain their focus. The team responded weakly, clearly grateful for the chance to recover. Later, Dojin sat by the campfire while Inju treated Sung-ho's injuries. The others were scattered nearby, either tending to their gear or quietly recuperating. Over the fire, meat sizzled and browned to a rich golden color, fat dripping into the flames with soft crackles. Dojin watched it intently, as if guarding something precious. He did not blink, wary of letting it burn. A long-haired teammate eventually approached, gesturing toward the skewer and asking if he could try some. Seeing the man's enthusiasm, Dojin handed him a skewer without hesitation. The teammate grinned broadly in gratitude. Nearby, Hyun-woo observed the scene from behind a tree, puzzled as he questioned why they were suddenly eating monster meat. The long-haired man shrugged casually, joking that maybe this food was the reason Dojin was so strong. That sparked Hyun-woo's curiosity. He wondered aloud if he should try it too, questioning whether it might actually have an effect. Encouraged, he took a seat and bit into the roasted meat, immediately struck by its rich aroma and crisp texture. Soon both men were eating enthusiastically, as if it were the best meal they had tasted in weeks. Across the fire, Dojin watched them with quiet amusement. He reflected inwardly that the meat alone would do little more than satisfy hunger, though he did not dislike people who genuinely wished to grow stronger. He decided to consider it a small gift. Extending his hand, Dojin released a faint stream of energy, guiding it subtly into both men. Almost instantly, their eyes widened in shock. The long-haired man exclaimed in disbelief that he suddenly felt stronger, his entire body surging with unfamiliar energy. Hyun-woo echoed the sentiment, flexing his hands as he confirmed the same sensation. Dojin smiled faintly, clearly satisfied with their reactions. Time passed quickly. Once everyone had recovered, the group regrouped to discuss their next move. Holding the map, Inju pointed to a spiral mark near the center, explaining that continuing straight would lead them to the rift's core. However, she emphasized that the team was already exhausted and suggested retreating to attack again the following day. She then looked to Dojin, reminding him that although he intended to seal the rift immediately, they still needed a solid approach. Dojin nodded in agreement, admitting her fatigue and pointing out that the monsters were growing stronger, likely due to the dark energy leaking from the rift. Dojin leaned over the map, his focus completely absorbed, thoughts moving rapidly through his mind. The original plan had been to delay sealing the rift for as long as possible, allowing them to harvest rare materials, valuable resources like the blue crocodile heart and other items found only in Brazil. However, the sudden surge of dark energy had overturned everything. Unpredictable variables like this were never a good sign. The presence of that darkness unsettled him deeply, leaving a faint sense of unease lingering in his chest. Reaching into his pack, Dojin pulled out a small pouch filled with crimson stones. He instructed the group to take them and return to the hotel first, his tone calm and deliberate. Though confusion flickered across their faces, everyone followed his instructions without protest. Once the weight in his pack had been reduced, Dojin slung it back over his shoulder and turned toward them, offering a composed, reassuring smile. He quietly stated that he would seal the rift himself and catch up with them shortly after. At that moment, a slimy monster erupted with a guttural roar, its mouth splitting wide to reveal jagged fangs dripping with sludge. Dojin did not flinch. He launched himself forward like a spear, plunging straight into the creature's gaping maw. Behind him, more monsters bubbled up from the darkness, their amorphous bodies forming one after another as they lunged toward him, eager to devour him whole. Dojin's pupils narrowed. He kicked off the ground and leapt high into the air, slicing downward in a sweeping arc that ripped through the cluster of creatures. Steel flashed, motion blurred. Then came the sickening sound of bodies bursting apart. As the monsters collapsed, Dojin plunged his hand into the gelatinous remains, searching with practiced precision. His fingers brushed against something solid. When he pulled it free, a vivid crimson core gleamed like a flawless ruby, pulsing faintly with energy. Elsewhere, Inju stood beside Dojin, worry etched clearly across her face. She voiced her concern about whether Dojin would be all right facing that fight alone. Dojin released a soft breath, pointing out how he had shot off like a bullet immediately after parting with them. Inju followed her gaze toward the direction he had disappeared, quietly acknowledging that she had seen it too. Dojin murmured to herself that he still looked like he had plenty of stamina left. Inju smirked, looping an arm around Dojin's shoulder, teasingly suggesting that her expression betrayed worry. Dojin closed her eyes and dismissed the notion, insisting she was not worried in the slightest. Yet inwardly her pride stung sharply. She reminded herself that she was an S rank as well, and yet the gap between them felt impossibly wide. The thought lingered uncomfortably in her mind. She could not help but wonder whether anyone else in the world could truly stand on equal footing with someone like him. Meanwhile, Dojin had already moved on from the swamp fiends, confronting a new threat, an entire horde of black orcs. He vaulted into the air, sword raised high, and brought it crashing down onto an orc's skull, cleaving the creature clean in two. Without slowing, he followed with a sharp horizontal slash, tearing across another orc's face. His blade moved like lightning, each strike brutal, efficient, and final. The orcs roared in fury, raising their crude weapons as they retaliated. Massive blades slammed into the ground, splintering the earth and shaking the forest. But Dojin merely inhaled slowly, his expression calm and unshaken, a glow ignited in his hand, pure power burning bright like fire. With a single motion, he unleashed it. The blast surged outward, engulfing the orcs in a violent inferno of energy. The explosion thundered through the forest, followed by the heavy thuds of collapsing bodies and the hiss of smoke rising from scorched flesh. Above, the night sky glittered with countless stars, shimmering like a sea of light. Beneath it, Dojin stood alone, clutching the blood-red ruby in his hand. By morning, the group set out again, their backpacks heavy on their shoulders as they trudged forward, exhaustion etched into every step. They moved in a quiet line through the trees until something darted toward them. In an instant, a sword sliced through the air, and blood sprayed across the path. The strike came from Dojin. His blade gleamed crimson, unwavering, his expression calm and cold as steel. He knelt beside the fallen creature, eyes glinting, and reached into its chest cavity. With one clean motion, he pulled out a still-beating red heart and dropped it into a glass vial. Twisting the cap tight, he tucked it away like a trophy. At his feet, the monster's corpse was already dissolving into the ground. Dojin sifted through the remains and retrieved 2 more rubies, adding them to his growing stash. One by one, the crimson gems piled up until a small mound glittered beside him. He muttered with a faint, satisfied smile, noting the spoils and thinking that he had done well enough. Slung over his shoulder once more, Dojin moved forward along the narrow path that led to the Hero Association's Brazil branch, the operations headquarters, one hand resting on the hilt of his sword, the other gripping the strap tightly. Inside the control room, several staff members watched the surveillance monitors when something unusual appeared on the screen. On the digital map, a red dot began flashing, pulsing with an active signal. One technician frowned, realizing that it was the Santime region. Moments later, the red dot vanished. Silence filled the room, and everyone held their breath until a collective sigh of relief swept through. One staff member remarked in disbelief that the rift had been sealed. In the Santa Coordination Office, someone asked which team had been assigned to that area. Another staffer recalled that it was from Korea, the Silk Flower Guild. A staffer at a console confirmed that the team had contacted them about 10 minutes ago, reporting that they were on their way back. Jeffrey blinked, asking if it had really been 10 minutes ago. The staffer nodded, confirming that the team had just left the rift at that time. Jeffrey's face twisted in confusion as he wondered what could have happened. 10 minutes earlier, a massive 2-headed beast loomed before Dojin, its grotesque form pulsing with dark mana, mutating and evolving before his eyes. The creature snarled and reared up, both heads roaring in unison. Then, with a thunderous crash, it stomped one enormous foot down. The impact sent shockwaves tearing through the ground, leaving a deep crater beneath it. Fortunately, Dojin was already moving. His instincts kicked in, and he leapt high into the air, narrowly avoiding the quake. As he soared upward, his eyes caught sight of something behind the monster, a swirling vortex of energy, faint but unmistakable, a spatial gate. He realized immediately that it must be the rift's core. He muttered under his breath, tightening his grip on his sword, ready to finish the fight. He dove toward the beast. The 2-headed monster lunged forward to meet him head-on, its claws slicing through the air. Mana flared violently from Dojin's body, a blaze of pure, unrestrained power. The creature spun like a cyclone, dark energy swirling around its twin heads as it clashed with his strike. Dojin's eyes widened, his focus razor-sharp, Van Sword style, second form. The spellbook Gamri activated, and magic surged along the path of Dojin's blade. His sword gleamed, transforming into a streak of pure energy that shot forward at terrifying speed. The 2-headed monster barely had time to comprehend what was happening before the strike landed, carving deep into its flesh. A pained roar tore through the air as the creature clutched at its wound, rage and agony twisting its grotesque faces. Dojin smirked, thinking that this was just the beginning. Without wasting a moment, he dashed forward again. Slash. His blade swept across the creature's torso, blood splattering into the air. The monster's eyes flared crimson with fury. It swung its arm in retaliation, but Dojin vaulted upward, narrowly dodging the counter-attack. Hovering mid-air, he spoke with a calm, cutting tone, declaring that it was now his turn. His sword multiplied, a blur of afterimages infused with blazing power. Each swing unleashed a wave of force that tore through everything in its path. Even a glancing blow from his strikes could split an ancient tree clean in half, sending it crashing to the ground. Explosions erupted around them, shaking the forest to its core. The monster's eyes rolled white with rage as it crouched and launched itself high into the air, both arms raised to deliver a crushing blow. Dojin did not hesitate. He twisted his body, his blade slicing clean through one of its legs. The creature howled, momentarily paralyzed by pain. Taking advantage of the opening, Dojin leapt upward, his sword gleaming with lethal intent. With a single strike, the 2-headed beast was cleaved in half from head to toe. Landing lightly amid the chaos, Dojin exhaled in exhaustion and sheathed his sword. A swirling vortex of magic appeared before him, expanding steadily as time passed. He studied it closely, his thoughts racing. Even this close to the core, the concentration of dark mana had not diminished. If it was not leaking from the rift itself, could it be coming from an external source? That would mean someone was orchestrating this. To saturate a rift zone with dark mana on such a scale, only a demon lord or a grand archmage from the ancient ages could manage it. But if such a being truly existed here, nearly all life on Earth would already have been reduced to dust. The conclusion was still unclear. Even if the mana originated from outside the rift, simply sealing it would not resolve the root of the problem. Clenching his fist, Dojin stepped forward, drawing power into his arm. With a single earth-shattering punch, he drove his fist into the heart of the vortex. A faint crack appeared, spider-webbing outward until the entire vortex shattered into fragments of light. Dojin watched as it collapsed completely, realizing that he would need to investigate the tower further. Meanwhile, at the Hero Association's Brazil headquarters, Injin sat at his desk, hands trembling as he read through a report. Standing before him was Chunong, bracing himself for the storm about to come. Injin's eyes darkened as he thought that regardless of the source of this mana or the method of investigation, the report sounded utterly impossible. Chunong responded quietly, confirming the report. Injin's expression hardened. Some rifts had required an alliance task force from 3 nations to close, yet only a single S-rank hero survived in the end. Meanwhile, another team from South Korea had not only managed to close their assigned rift, but had done so without losing a single member. Chunong stepped forward and reported that a flood of emergency reports from other rift zones had arrived. Most indicated that dispatch teams had failed and were forced to retreat. He added that he would compile all available information and send a full report as soon as possible. Injin braced his hands against the desk, lost in grim contemplation. Every rift had at least one S-rank hero in charge, and they still suffered total defeat. He concluded that the only successful team was the Korean one led by Julian. Cold sweat ran down Chunong's temple. He began to clarify that calling it a Korean team might not be entirely accurate, but Injin cut him off sharply, demanding an explanation. Flipping through the documents, Injin realized that the Korean team had already left the rift before it was sealed. Injin's disbelief grew. He demanded to know who had closed it and where Dojin was now. Chunong straightened and replied that she was on her way to headquarters to deliver a full debriefing. Injin's composure snapped. He slammed his palm against the desk and ordered that she be brought there immediately. From the moment Julian and Injin's team had exited the rift, it had taken roughly an hour to reach headquarters. During that same hour, Dojin had already sealed the first rift and was venturing into the second one. Standing before the shimmering surface, Dojin noticed that this portal's entrance lay beneath the water. Adjusting the straps of his backpack, he took a steady breath and stepped forward, determination flashing in his eyes as he prepared to tackle the next challenge. Back at the Brazil Hero Association headquarters, no sooner had Julian returned than she was summoned immediately by Injin for questioning. After hearing her account, Injin's expression grew skeptical. He could hardly believe what she claimed, his tone heavy with disbelief. Across from him, Julian remained calm and composed, stating simply that if it was Dojin, then it was entirely possible. To Injin, that answer was hardly satisfying. He frowned, leaning forward, demanding confirmation that Hero Dojin had indeed single-handedly sealed the rift. The light purple-haired woman gave a quiet nod, confirming it. That was probably the case. Silence lingered for several seconds before Injin spoke again. His voice lowered. He noted that this was classified information, but there had been reports that even some S-rank heroes had died at other rift sites. Julian's expression darkened, admitting with firm conviction that if Dojin had not been there, she would have shared their fate. Injin sighed deeply, rubbing his temples, thinking that the situation was almost impossible to believe. Those monsters had been enhanced by dark mana, a force even greater than that of an S-rank hero, and yet Dojin had managed to overcome it all. Julian gave only a silent nod of acknowledgement, setting the matter aside for a moment. Injin recalled another report stating that several rifts in the southern regions had also been closed. He asked cautiously whether dark mana had appeared in those locations yet. At his words, Julian's expression sharpened. She emphasized that they could not let their guard down, warning that the danger level this time was far beyond anything they had encountered before. Injin nodded. Understanding her implication, he asked if she was referring to the difference in the color of the portal entrances. She confirmed that it was the only way they could currently assess it. Immediately, Injin picked up the phone and ordered his subordinates to inspect every rift entrance across Brazil without delay. As he issued command after command, Julian, having completed her part in the meeting, rose to leave. She had not walked far when her phone rang. Answering quickly, she reported that the energy they had detected was definitely dark mana, and inquired whether there had been any unusual changes in the Korean region. On the other end, the burly chairman's voice was cold and curt. He confirmed that there were no reports so far and instructed her to continue monitoring the situation closely. The call ended, leaving both of them in uneasy silence, each weighed down by the same grim thought. Even S-rank heroes might not be able to handle the sheer number of monsters imbued with dark mana, and if a bot-level creature ever received that power, the result would be catastrophic. They needed to prepare for the worst. The scene shifted to Dojin. As he descended into the lake, he reviewed the relevant knowledge in his mind. Rivers, lakes, islands, rifts, and aquatic environments almost always had their cores underwater. But since humans could not breathe in such conditions, very few heroes could unleash their full strength there. He recalled one exception: Ivan Lopper, New Zealand's national hero and an S-rank specialist in aquatic combat. Upon awakening, Ivan had gained the unique trait of underwater respiration, which was why he was paid an astronomical rate to handle underwater rifts worldwide. As Dojin's body became completely enveloped by water, he felt a sudden pulse of energy. He realized that the concentration of dark mana down there was even denser. Determined, he muttered to himself that it was time to begin. Acting on instinct, he dug deeper. The further he descended, the darker and murkier the water became. He wondered if this was the direct effect of the dark mana. Adjusting his stance, he planned his next move. First, he needed to control his buoyancy, then compensate for the drag. Channeling his energy, Dojin enveloped his body in a thin, shimmering layer of pale golden aura. As soon as it formed, the resistance of the surrounding water lessened dramatically, allowing him to move more freely. Not long after, his feet finally touched the riverbed. But before he could take another breath, or act further, a thunderous roar erupted from his side. He turned sharply just in time to see a monstrous aquatic beast lunging at him with its jaws wide open. The creature did not attempt a direct bite. Instead, it coiled its enormous serpent-like body around him, trying to crush him in its constricting grip. With a calm glance at its sinuous form, Dojin immediately recognized the creature and Acheron. He noted that the dark mana seemed to have made it unusually aggressive. Before the creature could tighten its grip, Dojin released a small surge of energy. The aura burst outward violently, and in an instant the Acheron's massive body was torn to shreds, its remains scattering through the water in a cloud of blood and viscera. The bloody spectacle did not go unnoticed. The scent of fresh meat instantly attracted a swarm of other aquatic monsters. Dozens of hideous fish-like creatures darted in from the shadows, ripping apart the remains of the Acheron. Yet, as the feast continued, their glowing crimson eyes soon turned toward Dojin, the lone figure standing amid the wreckage. In the next moment, the entire school surged toward him like a living current of death. Dojin did not retreat. Planting his feet firmly on the riverbed, he threw a punch. His movements were fluid, unimpeded by the surrounding water. Anyone witnessing the scene would have been utterly stunned. Despite being submerged, Dojin's body moved with the same precision and explosive power as if he were standing on solid ground. His legs braced perfectly against the currents, his fists slicing through the water with impossible speed. Within seconds he was brawling with the sharks, crushing them with bone-shattering blows and dodging the grasping tentacles of colossal octopi. But the more he fought, the more monsters swarmed in, drawn by the scent of blood and the lingering traces of dark mana.
This is getting annoying, he thought grimly, stating that he did not have time to waste there. Deciding not to prolong the skirmish, Dojin kicked off the ground and surged forward in a burst of golden energy that left shimmering trails in the water behind him. He swam faster and faster through the depths while his eyes scanned the murky surroundings until suddenly he froze. There, resting motionless atop a large boulder, was a fish unlike any of the others. Its scales shimmered faintly in the darkness, and from its head gleamed two eerie amethyst-colored eyes glowing through the gloom. Dojin's gaze hardened the moment he recognized it as an acromos. The instant he laid eyes on the strange creature, Dojin's face broke into a delighted grin. He remarked that he did not expect to find an acromos there. Recalling knowledge from his previous world, he explained that every legendary figure back when they were still nobodies had one thing in common: they had all hunted an acromos. Believing he could not miss such a golden opportunity, he immediately kicked off the riverbed and shot forward toward the creature. On the opposite side, the acromos also noticed Dojin approaching. Instantly, it activated its innate ability and generated a swirling vortex of distorted space, radiating ominous energy as it slowly expanded outward in every direction. Seeing this, Dojin slammed both feet into the riverbed, digging deep into the silt to halt his advance. Recalling everything he knew about the creature, he noted that the acromos had no natural predators because no matter what it faced, it created a subspace capable of swallowing its opponents whole. The spiraling vortex continued growing larger and more unstable. Gritting his teeth, Dojin let out a cold snort and began channeling his own mana directly into the distortion, while resisting the pull of the vortex. He reasoned that if he simply killed the creature, it would be too easy, but he would not be able to obtain its subspace, concluding that he had to suppress it using pure mana so the subspace would truly become his. With that resolve burning inside his chest, Dojin tilted his head back and roared as he unleashed a terrifying surge of mana. The massive wave of power instantly overwhelmed the entire space created by the acromos, and the pressure blasted away every aquatic beast lurking nearby. Yet before long, the vortex began expanding once again. Undeterred, Dujin's expression darkened, and he stretched one hand forward while warning himself silently that at this rate he would eventually be forced back. Realizing the only way to replenish his mana was to absorb the dark mana of the deep sea, he thrust both hands forward, simultaneously restraining the vortex's expansion while drawing in the surrounding dark mana to recover his strength. However, the strain quickly began catching up to him and blood slowly trickled from his nose, wiping it away. Dujin frowned and admitted that the power was still too much for his current body. Deciding there was no other choice, he resolved that the battle would have to be settled head-on, and so a fierce clash of wills and power began. Time seemed to lose all meaning as Dujin and the Ekremos struggled for dominance while their mana collided violently and warped the surrounding space. Then suddenly the ground beneath them erupted in a violent explosion and both Dujin and the Ekremos burst out from the shattered riverbed. When the light finally cleared, Dujin stood there gripping a swirling sphere of condensed space in his palm. Realizing he had successfully obtained the Ekremos subspace, the thought filled him with exhilaration as both he and the fish tumbled back into the depths of the river. Hours passed, and by the time afternoon arrived, the swordsman finally regained consciousness. He was rudely awakened by a few birds pecking at his head, and he sneezed loudly, which startled them into a frantic storm of wings before they scattered into the sky. As his senses slowly returned, Dojun realized he had passed out after expending nearly all of his energy during the battle with the Ekremos. Checking his condition, he soon noticed something peculiar as a faint aura shimmered around his hand and his mana felt noticeably denser than before. Murmuring to himself, he observed that his mana capacity had increased compared to before, and concluded that the struggle had been worth it. He also noted with satisfaction that the newly acquired subspace was the largest one he had obtained so far. With a pleased smile, Dojun casually tossed his pack and sword into the swirling subspace that appeared before him. Then he stretched his arms and declared with relief that there was nothing left to do inside the rift, deciding it was finally time to close it and return to the dorms.